Ahead on American Sunrise Early Edition, President Trump gives a big verbal thumbs up to Elon Musk's Doge email plan. But it looks like plenty of waivers are also in place that will allow certain agencies to ignore the order. But one thing is clear, the latest polls show the voters are speaking with almost one voice about what Doge is actually doing. The U.S. puts more pressure on Ukraine by backing a UN resolution that calls for peace between Kiev and Moscow and doesn't demand Russia give up any territory. The Supreme Court almost unanimously upholds the buffer zones around abortion clinics that keep protesters and prayer vigils far from their doors. It's yet another decision blowing up the false narrative that the High Court is controlled by religious extremists. The obvious cost-cutting and downsizing continues for the legacy media. Lester Holt is stepping down as the teleprompter reader at NBC Nightly News. For his $10 million base salary, they probably could have hired a few journalists. And the Vatican is now holding nighttime prayer vigils in St. Peter's Square for a still ailing Pope Francis. He remains in the hospital in multiple critical ailments. American Sunrise Early Edition starts now.
Welcome to American Sunrise Early Edition. The show where faith, freedom, and the values that built this nation take center stage.
Your good deeds and bad deeds. That's how we're going to judge you.
Join host Jake Novak as he breaks down the stories that matter.
We will be letting the public know regularly what we have found.
American Sunrise Early Edition with your host, Jake Novak, starts now.
Welcome to American Sunrise Early Edition. I'm Jake Novak. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, joining the chat in Getter and Rumble, watching us on those platforms. Hey, it may not be clear which federal workers have to send that "what did you do last week" email to Doge and Elon Musk. I know there's a lot of confusion about that. But what is clear is that President Trump still backs Musk and calls the email idea brilliant. And a new Harvard-Harris poll says close to 80% of the American people support the government waste-cutting work that Doge is doing. So there's your clarity. Joining me now for more clarity is Republican strategist Vanessa Simon. I didn't ask you to send me an email about what you did last week, Vanessa. I will accept an interpretive dance. But seriously, does the American public, don't we deserve an audit of where all of our money has been going and what people are doing?
Absolutely, Jake. You're talking to a pro-Doge person right now. I think it's amazing. We should be following up on efficiency. Quick question, when was the last time you dealt with any federal government agency, whether it's the DMV, calling the IRS? It is painful to call them in. I remember I spent 2.5 hours on the phone waiting to get through IRS just to speak and ask a question. And these are my tax dollars. So I absolutely support the efficiency behind it. We should be following up. Every company does. We're all held to that accountability standard. Why not our government?
Yeah, and again, you talk about accountability. There's also incentives, carrot and stick. What is the incentive for someone at the IRS, for example, to get a call done quickly? Do they get a bonus? Are they going to get a pat on the head? Are they going to get fewer hours at work? Or do they have a certain number of people calls they have to take and then they go home? The answer is no to all of those questions. And you cannot have efficient workplaces or businesses or even government agencies unless there is some kind of incentive structure like that. And I think, by the way, that should be if I had to give it any advice to Elon Musk and Doge, while they're using this stick approach, you might get laid off. You got to send this email. You have to show up to work. They should also be starting to think about a carrot approach. That, hey, if you're at the IRS and you successfully answer the questions of X amount of people, then you get maybe a day off or something like that. There has to be a little bit of both. And right now we have neither. Vanessa, I could almost hear the groans of anger from the left after this story broke yesterday. Only 2 of the 9 Supreme Court justices objected to keeping the buffer zone that local police can put around abortion clinics to prevent pro-lifers from praying or demonstrating near them. If you're a pro-life activist, you have much less rights, much fewer rights than anybody else. But I thought, Vanessa, that the Supreme Court was supposed to be a bunch of religious extremists, hostile to women, and they want to convert us all. They leave toilet seats up. I mean, really, what gives here? Why won't the news media admit that they're wrong about this court?
I mean, when has the media ever admitted that? I think that was something that was truthful and telling, because this is such a critical historical issue for Americans. We continue to battle forth, but it was really uncanny. And I think you're right. It shocked the nation that they made such a decision.
Such a much of a shock that if you take a look at the news, the mainstream news media reports on this, actually pretty much everyone buried this story. And one of the things that I noticed is in the headlines and in the leads to each story, they kept saying divided Supreme Court, divided Supreme Court. Actually, it was a 7-2 decision not to hear it. So in other words, they didn't have to have an actual vote, but there were two justices, Justice Alito and Justice Thomas, who objected to it. They wanted to hear this case. So in other words, this so-called conservative Supreme Court with 6 radical right-wing justices, only 2 of them had a problem with this. And again, it's not so much the decision of the court that makes it interesting to me. It's the fact that the news media buried it. They have to continue to lie to their own listeners and readers and viewers and tell them that this is a very radical court. As I keep saying, we don't have a conservative Supreme Court. Don't call it that. It's a Supreme Court with 6 common sense justices and 3 justices who most of the time, or at least in critical times, are not common sense. That's the important narrative here. All right, Vanessa, let's talk common sense in your and my home state of New York. Let's turn to New York, a New York story, because it's interesting for the entire nation. And I do think there's some other state governors who are watching this closely. As you know, Governor Kathy Hochul decided not to try to remove New York City Mayor Eric Adams last week from office. Now, do you think she stopped short of doing that because she simply is trying to see if maybe Eric Adams won't become a friend to President Trump? Or is it because she didn't have the juice? She didn't have the power really to do it and get away with it?
I think it's both. It's two-pronged. I mean, ultimately, she doesn't have the power to do so. And I think that was apparent in the decision she ended up making. Also, she's got the gubernatorial race right on the horizon. 2026, Hochul's up. And I think she's made several poor decisions. I think a lot of New Yorkers are like, what is Kathy Hochul truly doing for the betterment of New Yorkers? So for that, I think it's both, right? She doesn't have the power, and she really wants to have her own personal interests at heart here. We've got 2026 gubernatorial race here in New York, and she's really got to pick and choose her battles really well. It's like, is this worth investing in and doing, and being plastered all over the national news for making essentially the wrong decision when you don't have the power to begin with?
Yeah, I have another question about Hochul, which I think also has national interest in just a second. But I want to ask you first about Eric Adams and how I think a number of us on the conservative side and other people are giving him a little bit too much of a benefit of the doubt. I know it sounds like he might start to lean to support President Trump's migrant policies and the deportations, but Vanessa, he hasn't really done anything yet, has he?
I mean, poor guy. He's trying to scramble and fight not only the media, but Kathy Hochul and just our justice system here in New York. So I think if he gets a little breathing room, he could focus on what's important here in New York.
Yeah, listen, I grew up, came to New York after growing up in the South mostly when Mayor Koch was the mayor, and then we had David Dinkins, and then we had, then of course Rudy Giuliani came on, and all 3 of those mayors that I just said, even David Dinkins, had disputes with Democrats in office in the presidency for the better of New York. Not so much Dinkins, but he did actually do it a couple of times. Mayor Koch was very critical of President Carter. Rudy Giuliani did not go along with President Bush at some points. Honestly, I think that there's something to be said here for independence here, as far as being a mayor of New York City. But there is no independence, at least no brave independence from Governor Hochul. Again, this is another issue that is important to the nation. Many of you, of course, are seeing higher heating bills. We've had a big cold snap, and of course, we're having inflation. And Governor Hochul was supposed to usher in pretty much a ban on new gas hookups in people's apartments and homes. She was supposed to enforce an all-electric power mandate, but she keeps putting it off because of what I just said. Because of inflation, because heating prices are going up even before she cuts supply like this. Honestly, this is cowardice on my part. She did the same thing with congestion pricing. She delayed it until after the election. Do you think maybe this time New Yorkers might win out because she can't delay it all the way through the governor's election that you talked about? Maybe we'll win this time. Maybe she'll just put this on hold forever. I'm hoping.
I mean, I hope she saw exactly what happened with congestion pricing and took a few notes, right? We highlighted the gubernatorial race coming up in 26, but I think Kathy will see New Yorkers wake up to the overwhelming apparent frustration of just being in New York. If New Yorkers can't see that we're on the trajectory to end up like California and what god awful Newsom did over there in Cali, I think Hochul needs to see the writing on the wall. She wants and must react to the needs of New Yorkers here. And, you know, hiking up prices, hiking up taxes, just New Yorkers are waving the white flag. Like, we need a breather, right? And I think it would behoove her to really take heed to that.
You know, Vanessa, can I ask you just really quickly about New York City? Because you're in the actual city. I'm on Long Island. It feels like there are a lot of dogs not barking. Has there been a massive protest in Manhattan against deportations? Has there been a massive protest in Manhattan against anything Donald Trump has done so far? I haven't seen it.
Not at all, right? We called it the silent majority across the nation, but there's a silent majority of city people right here in New York City, whether in all 5 boroughs, right? We go to work, we're exhausted, and I think with President Trump in office and at the helm, we're like, finally, we believe that change is on the way. So no, absolutely no protest, because we're happy that somebody's like fighting for us.
Yeah, I think if you can't get a bunch of people in Manhattan and activist groups there to get a critical mass of people to march against Donald Trump now, it's never going to happen. And that's a really good sign. Let's give this guy a chance in New York. I know maybe you didn't vote for him, but you know, you can't have migrants in the streets and you can't have your heating bills go up by 50%. Vanessa Simon, Republican strategist, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your week.
Jake, thank you.
All right, coming up, this news that must be absolutely devastating for the mainstream news media. Everything they've worked for is blowing up in their faces. I will explain. And the same people shrieking over federal worker layoffs were gleefully smug when thousands of American workers in the heartland lost their jobs thanks to DC policies. I'll show you an awful red-headed example just ahead. Welcome back to American Sunrise Early Edition. That's a live shot of New York. We talked a lot about New York in the last block. Okay, no New York content for a while, maybe the rest of the show. I hear you. And good morning to our viewers in Ackworth, Georgia. Got a hello from there on Getter. Please keep contributing there. The combination of intelligence and humor on that Getter chat gets me going. during the commercial break. So thank you so much. Hey, again, this is American Sunrise. I'm Jake Novak. I don't know what could be more of a glaring example of the legacy news media's failures than a new survey that came out from YouGov. This is interesting. The polling outfit shows that only 29% of Americans say they have a fair amount or a great deal of trust in what the establishment news media says. But 44% have at least a fair amount of trust in Donald Trump's administration to state facts fully. Now, you might say this is just a partisan loss for them, but understand this is a operational loss for the mainstream news media because they are constantly, not a day goes by when you don't watch a mainstream news media show. Hopefully you're not watching it. Maybe you're just seeing a clip somewhere else. Reading a mainstream newspaper, looking at a website where they don't put in the headline, not in an opinion piece, not buried in the middle of a column or in the middle of a story, but in the headlines, telling you that Donald Trump is lying to you, and it has backfired. More of the American people believe it's the mainstream media that's lying to them and not President Trump and the administration. This is a huge loss because it's a lot of work, a lot of rules they broke, a lot of stretching they've done over the last 8, 9 years, 10 years really, to attack President Trump's character, and they're the ones who have ended up looking the worse for wear. Pretty important development there. We'll see if this continues. One of the voices in the establishment media is former Obama and Biden administration spokeswoman Jen Psaki. She's got her own show on MSNBC right now. For now, anyway. Host of Human Events Daily on RAV, Jack Posobiec, posted this soundbite of Psaki in 2021 showing her extreme disregard for oil, pipeline, and natural gas workers who had lost their jobs because of Joe Biden's executive orders in 2021. So before you start feeling bad for federal workers, remember this is how they responded to American heartland workers losing their jobs. Watch.
Thank you, Jen. I do have a question on COVID, but first on energy. When is it that the Biden administration is going to let the thousands of fossil fuel industry workers, whether it's pipeline workers or construction workers, who are either out of work or will soon be out of work because of a Biden EO, when it is and where it is that they can go for their green job? And that is something the administration has promised. There is now a gap. So I'm just curious when that happens, when those people can count on that.
Well, I'd certainly welcome you to present your data of all the thousands and thousands of people who won't be getting a green job. Maybe next time you're here, you can present that.
But you said that they would be getting green jobs, so I'm just asking when that happens. Richard Trumka, who is a friend, longtime friend of Joe Biden, says about that day one Keystone EO, he says, I wish he, the president, had paired that more carefully with the thing that he did second by saying, here's where we are creating the jobs. So there's partial evidence from Richard Trumka.
Well, you didn't include all of his interview. Would you like to include the rest?
So how about this? The Laborers International Union of North America said the Keystone decision will cost 1,000 existing union jobs and 10,000 projected construction jobs.
Well, what Mr. Trumka also indicated in the same interview was that President Biden has proposed a climate plan with transformative investments in infrastructure and laid out a plan that will not only create millions of good union jobs, but also help tackle the climate crisis. And as the president has indicated when he gave his primetime address to talk about the American Rescue Plan, he talked about his plans to also put forward a jobs plan in the weeks or months following, and he has every plan to do exactly that.
But there are people living paycheck to paycheck. There are now people out of job once the Keystone Pipeline stopped construction. It's been 12 days since Gina McCarthy and John Kerry were here, and it's been 19 days since that EO. So what are these people who need money now? When do they get their green job?
Well, the president and many Democrats and Republicans in Congress believe that investment in infrastructure, building infrastructure that's in our national interests and that boosts the U.S. economy, creates good-paying union jobs here in America and advances our climate and clean energy goals are something that we can certainly work on doing together. And he has every plan to share more about his details of that plan in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, that was 4 years ago. Spoiler alert. Those millions of green jobs never happened. A lot of those oil pipeline, nat gas fracking jobs, they were all lost. They may be coming back soon, but they were lost for at least these last 4 years. And it's all just about being smug about it. There were people in the federal government who smugly posted on social media that those oil workers and those pipeline construction workers should learn to code. these are the people, I hope those are the people who get the axe first from Doge. That's probably just wishful thinking. But again, green energy is a nice alternative, additional thing you can put in your back pocket, but it is still not able to provide the energy that we need in this country for the large amount of energy that we need for our large demand. And it's getting bigger, by the way. And we still need to have these oil drillers. We need to frack. We need to build the pipelines. And hopefully we're getting onto that track right now. So good for Jack Posobiec for putting up that clip and reminding us about those federal workers we're supposed to be crying about. You can see Jack on Human Events Daily here on Real America's Voice every Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, coming up, President Trump has a message for Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Mexican President Sheinbaum. And that message is game on. Buckle up. And if you're sick of being stuck in traffic and you have an extra $300,000 lying around, this could be your future. Check it out. There it goes. I'll have the latest on this very real, it's real, flying car in moving America in just a few minutes. This is American Sunrise, early edition. You're looking live at Las Vegas, Nevada. By the way, it's Nevada, not the other way. Now, I'm not even going to say it the other way. I don't want to get it into your head. It's Nevada. Anyway, that's Allegiant Stadium where the Raiders play. They don't really play well, but that's their stadium. And we're not trying to be snarky here on American Sunrise Early Edition. When we go from Las Vegas to the stock board, investing is not quite gambling, although there's a gambling aspect to it. I don't want to be cheeky here. Let's take a look where we're going to open this morning. Very, very flat. Slight losses to open. But I want you to take a look at this next screen, the Bitcoin numbers right now, because something really interesting happening in Bitcoin. We are below the $90,000 mark for Bitcoin for the first time in 3 months. I still think Bitcoin has a lot of room to go higher. If you're the kind of investor who likes to buy on the dips, maybe this is your opportunity. Again, I don't give investment advice. I'm just calling it like a play-by-play man. And you're seeing it below 90 grand. It's been about 3.5 months since we saw that. All right, here's another thing investors are looking at very, very closely right now, and the rest of the country too, the Trump tariff deadlines again. And Wall Street definitely wants to keep the borders open and the tariffs on hold. I'm sorry, Wall Street, listen, a lot of great things about Wall Street, but they are not good on the border. Let's just face it. We learned that again yesterday when stocks fell in response to this answer to a question about tariffs by President Trump. Check it out.
Next week, there's a key deadline for your Canada and Mexico tariffs. I believe those countries have done enough on the border to stop those from taking effect. And for President Macron, I'm wondering if you believe that this critical minerals deal with Ukraine represents a de facto security guarantee by the United States, since the U.S. would have an interest in protecting those reserves in Ukraine. Thank you.
We're on time with the tariffs, and it seems like that's moving along very rapidly. We've been mistreated very badly by many countries, not just Canada and Mexico. We've been taken advantage of. We were led by, in some cases, fools, because anybody that would sign documents like they signed, where they were able to take advantage of the American people, like has happened over the last long period of time, except for a little 4-year period that took place 4 years ago. But anybody that would agree to allow this to happen to our country should be ashamed of themselves. No, the tariffs are going forward on time, on schedule. This is an abuse that took place for many, many years. And I'm not even blaming the other countries that did this. I blame our leadership for allowing it to happen.
I hope none of you are crying in your coffee for Wall Street, because I promise, if the tariffs do go into effect on time, the big investors will find a way to profit from that too. Wall Street loses money when they don't know what's going to happen, when they're uncertain. As soon as they know what the policy is going to be, up or down, they make money on it. So they'll be fine. Don't worry about them. All right, you know what happens in the real world when a company starts to see its profits falling and rising costs? You know what happens? They cut staff, not like the federal government, at least not before Trump came along. Now, that's the deal at Starbucks. It plans to lay off 1,100 corporate employees globally as new chairman and CEO Brian Niccol streamlines operations. In a letter to employees, Niccol said the company will inform employees who are being laid off by midday today. Starbucks shares closed 1% higher yesterday on that news. Wall Street loves layoffs. If there's anything I can teach about Wall Street, remember that. They love layoffs. All right, speaking of loving layoffs, Wall Street titan and JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon is cheering Elon Musk and the Doge federal worker cuts. Dimon says, quote, "The government is inefficient, not very competent, and needs a lot of work." Then he added, "Why are we spending the money on these things? Are we getting what we deserve? What should we change?" It's not just about the deficit, it's about building the right policies and procedures and the government we deserve. Those are the words of Jamie Dimon, Wall Street titan. Now, good points, Jamie. I agree with you there. I think you're a fair weather friend, though, for liberty and President Trump, but your words ring true today, and we'll give you credit for that today. Thank you, Jamie. All right. Hey, tariffs aren't the only thing spooking Wall Street these days. So is the high cost of AI. These projects are pricey, and they also take up a lot of energy, so that's an added cost. And we're starting to see more caution from big tech leaders. Microsoft announced yesterday that it's taking some of its bigger AI investment plans a little bit slower. Satya Nadella, he's the CEO of Microsoft. He's afraid of an AI bubble, and he's got a point. Because again, AI isn't just expensive to create. There's competition from China, and they steal a lot of the technology. And when you get power grids across the world that are going to get strained by more AI use, that's going to be another problem. Right now, you're seeing a bunch of Wall Street people and CEOs of big tech worried about spending too much on AI before it even gets going. So watch this. This is another thing. So when they tell you that Wall Street's upset about the Trump tariffs, remember, it's not just about that. It could be about some other things going on. All right. Everyone, let's go for a drive. Well, yet another big-name vehicle line is delaying the rollout of a once much ballyhooed all-electric vehicle. Surprise, surprise. Dodge Ram Trucks rethinking its strategy for releasing its first electric pickup truck. Originally, the Ram 1500 REV was supposed to go on sale sometime before June of this year. Now the truck maker will prioritize its first plug-in hybrid pickup, the Ram 1500 Ram Charger. And that model is the one that's going to go on sale before June. The all-electric truck is now slated for sometime next year. Now, okay, cheer up, electric truck lovers. All 2 or 3 of you. I don't know how many of you there are. At least Dodge isn't ditching you for an old high school boyfriend from Bayonne. All right? You could be worse. Speaking of electric vehicles, in a sweeping policy shift, President Donald Trump's administration has just ordered the shutdown, this is interesting, of all electric vehicle charging stations at federal buildings across the United States. So let me get this straight. Federal workers with EVs were able to charge their cars at work, probably for free, by the way, and I shouldn't say for free. We probably paid for it. I've heard of a company car, but really? Man, the perks these federal workers get are just beyond the pale. Let's see how many other lawsuits arise. I promise you there's going to be federal worker lawsuits that say that taking away their free EV chargers is a severe human rights violation. Stay tuned. But that's crazy. All right, okay, maybe you think this is a joke, but let's see who's laughing the next time we're all stuck in traffic and I start the engines on one of these babies. This is the flying car prototype from Olive Aeronautics. That's a California company, and they're calling this test just a few days ago a success. Looks like a success to me. Looks a little shaky, but I'll take it. By the way, they're also estimating that the base price for this car, when it's available in a couple of years, at $300,000. But hey, with inflation, in a few years, that will be like nothing. I don't know about you, but traffic to me is the worst thing in the world. Getting stuck in it, it's a complete waste of time, unless I have work calls to do. I am willing to try this car. I don't care what anybody says. All right, now let's go from hopes for the future to a very unwelcome blast from the past. Check this story out. An 85-year-old man in New Brunswick, Canada, just learned that he's being fined for a minor fender bender accident that occurred in 1960. Yes, 65 years ago. The man says he has no recollection of the incident that the Canadian government says took place in Toronto. I'm inclined to believe him. If it was a fender bender 65 years ago, are you kidding? According to a spokesperson from New Brunswick's Department of Public Safety, Canada-wide scans are now being done to check for license suspensions in other provinces. Okay, but if the court order is more than a decade old, the department is not obligated to suspend the license or collect the fines. So I guess this case is just the Canadians showing they can go the extra mile. Don't you feel safer now? A fender bender 65 years ago, and this guy is getting something like a $5,000 fine. Unbelievable. All right, coming up, maybe there are some federal workers who have to comply with DOJ's email demand, and maybe some don't. But the bottom line is America wants the waste eliminated in D.C. I'll bring some receipts on that and talk to an expert on it. And how did these federal workers get so powerful anyway? Just ahead, I'll have a quick explanation of how FDR's stern warnings against federal worker unions went unheeded by JFK, and now we're all suffering. American Sunrise Early Edition is coming right back. It's Tuesday, February 25th. Here are some of today's top stories. President Trump gives a big verbal thumbs up to Elon Musk's Doge email plan. It looks like plenty of waivers are also in place that will allow certain agencies to ignore the order, but one thing is clear. The latest polls show the voters are speaking with almost one voice about what Doge is doing. The U.S. puts more pressure on Ukraine by backing a UN resolution that calls for peace between Kiev and Moscow and doesn't demand Russia give up any territory. An absolute low point for the mainstream media as a new poll asks the American people who they trust more as a news source, the establishment media or the Trump administration. Can you guess the results? And speaking of that mainstream media, the obvious cost-cutting and downsizing continues. Lester Holt stepping down as the teleprompter reader at NBC Nightly News. For his $10 million base salary, maybe he could share it with Joy Reid. They probably could have hired a few journalists too. American Sunrise Early Edition continues now. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to American Sunrise Early Edition. I'm Jake Novak. I'm just not reading the teleprompter. I'm actually writing all the stuff in it, too. So I give myself a pass. Sorry, Lester Holt. You read the teleprompter very, very nicely, but I don't really remember any kind of story that you broke or any insight that you have. $10 million a year base salary? Are you kidding me? NBC can't afford that anymore. That's why you're gone, not because of any politics. All right. Joining me now is senior editor Tyler O'Neill from the Daily Signal. He's also the author of the very, very new book. It still has that new book smell when you buy it. It's called The Woktopus, The Dark Money Cabal Manipulating the Federal Government. And Tyler, I know everyone else wants to make a big story about how there's confusion over which people in the federal government have to send an email to Elon Musk and Doge and the ones that don't. I get it. I'm not excusing that. I'd like to have some clarity on that too. But really, who cares? The big story to me, and I think to most of the American people, is the Harvard-Harris poll that shows something like 80% of Americans want the spending and the federal worker cuts. They want the spending cuts and they want the worker cuts. And I know you see that as clearly as I do, don't you?
Yes, indeed. I think that is the big story. The big story out of the last few weeks has been just how corrupt the federal government has been. The Trump administration exposing scandal after scandal after scandal. I mean, our hard-earned tax dollars going to promote transgender operas in far-flung parts of the world. That's not a joke. That's real. And so what you can see over and over again is the Trump administration exposing this waste and abuse. And the American people already wanted to see the federal government slimmed down, made more effective. I mean, the main thing is the left is acting as though this is an attack on the federal government overall. This is tightening the belt. This is making the government more accountable to the people. And that's one of the fundamental things that the American people want to see. And this Harvard-Harris poll just underscores yet again that whether, Trump and Musk have rolled out this program 100% effectively or not, this is something the American people really want, and large portions of them want. And many of us remember that Bill Clinton and Barack Obama were also talking about cutting waste and abuse.
Yeah, and another thing people don't understand, the federal government workforce has doubled, not in the last 60 years, not in the last 50 years, not in the last 20 years, but just in the last few years, the federal government workforce has doubled. No excuse for that whatsoever, especially when so many of them aren't coming into work. The realities of their power and their ability to continue to add to their numbers is just beyond me. But wait, Tyler, there's more, because a new YouGov poll has just come out that shows that only 29% of the public trusts the establishment news media, the same establishment news media that's telling us to cry about these federal workers. They're wondering why. Why isn't everyone crying about them? Because only 29% of the public actually trust you. 44% say that the Trump administration, they trusted a lot more to give it the facts. And that has got to be a tremendous fail for the mainstream press. But Tyler, they're not going to learn anything from this, are they?
No, I don't think they are. And I was really glad to see the AP, the Associated Press, kicked to the curb. I mean, they are one of the worst offenders. They have the AP style book, which most of us follow. We follow it for the basic things like spell protester with an ER instead of an OR, things like that. But they also have used the style book to make dissent from the left's shibboleths unthinkable. What they've tried to do is make it so that if you are a journalist, you have to write in a way that denies that there could be any truth to criticisms of climate alarmism, for instance. Or, one of my favorites was that they said you can't use the word transgenderism because it suggests that gender ideology is an ideology. And I'm like, this is basic number one things. Why do you not want us talking about the ideology? Oh, yeah, it's because you want the ideology forced upon us. They also have this, this double standard on race, which I find very interesting, where they capitalize black and brown and various things and lowercase white. Now, I don't care whether you want to capitalize or lowercase these things. I don't think that really matters. The real problem is when you are saying that some races have uppercase and some races have lowercase, you're engaging in racism. And even if your motives are pure, that's problematic.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, the AP is right now currently caught in a big hypocrisy because when Ukraine asked the AP to change the spelling and the pronunciation of Kiev, which is the more Russian way of doing it, to Kyiv, they did it immediately for political reasons. And now they're saying, well, we're not going to do Gulf of America because that's for political reasons. So they're caught, and this was kind of a last straw. But it is sad because the AP style book, as you said, was a great way to figure out, how do you refer to a president? Do you have to always say Mr.? We haven't had any women yet, or Ms. If we do eventually have a woman on second reference, things like that, things that are just like that bother you when you're in a newsroom. I can tell you something, Tyler, though. The fights over how to spell protester and what to put on a banner are the most vicious fights in the newsroom. The other things you talked about, policies about politics and the other horrible things in newsmedia, no one cares about that. But the fights over the spelling of protester and advisor, I mean, bar the door. All right, now this next story it's not unrelated to the last two. We have the mainstream press and the Democrats refusing to even comply with ICE attempts to arrest illegal aliens and have records of child rapists. Now, they're not even reporting it. That's the kind of behavior and policy that sows distrust when they don't even report that these horrible, horrible criminals are among, or at least most, maybe it might be most of the people that ICE is trying to round up. And so you have to look down. They seem to look down on the public and our concerns about crime as if we have no right to be afraid, no right to be concerned about who's in our schools and who's in our locker rooms. Tyler, this is exactly what I think starts that. It's not just about, oh, they didn't spell something right or they capitalized black. All those things are annoying. But when you have a mainstream press that's saying you don't have any right to complain about rapists, child rapists in your town, that's what really it kills their credibility.
And it comes up over and over and over again. If you notice, when President Trump raises an issue, the legacy press rushes to say he's lying and suppress any evidence. But yet, many of these situations, Trump is exactly right. And that's the number one thing I think we learned over the last 4 years, is that all the issues that Trump had warned about, the open border, the rise in gas prices, and of course the scourge of inflation, each thing, one after another, proved Trump's former policies and statements correct when America struggled because the left went whole hog in the other direction. So this is, when the legacy media decides not to cover stories and to slant its coverage in a very particular way that always supports one side, that's bad for our country because it prevents the natural checks and balances of our political system from coming to pass. And thankfully, the legacy press is losing its ability to control the narrative. And that's one of the main things we saw in November.
All right. Speaking of distorting the truth, distrust, and sneakiness, Tyler, you have a new piece out in the Daily Signal about the enormous and sometimes hidden power of federal worker unions. This has been a big issue for me. I was talking about it in the teases coming into this block. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Mr. Build the Government Out of Control, even he made very strong arguments and warnings about ever allowing federal workers to unionize. His words were followed until JFK came around, and what I believe is, and I'm not kidding, his biggest mistake of his presidency, which was not such a bad presidency, but this was his biggest mistake, he allowed this to happen. And now we have a permanent political class in this country that is almost without any checks and balances. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were writing about this week?
Yeah, well, I don't think you can realistically have a deep state unless your bureaucracy is insulated from the people's elected leaders. And so what we've seen is these people who are willing to go against the people's elected president of the United States, bureaucrats who think they know better than the American people. Why do they think they know better than the American people? It's because they've been insulated from the natural checks and balances of our government. And why have they been insulated? Because of these public sector unions. So right now what we're seeing is many of the lawsuits that are moving against the Trump administration's reforms in Washington are filed by groups like the American Federation for Government Employees, AFGE, which is one of these public sector unions that FDR said shouldn't exist. And there are many good reasons why FDR said they shouldn't exist. AFGE has been filing lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, challenging DOGE, challenging Trump's orders to get back to work, challenging pretty much everything that would weaken the federal bureaucracy. And that's no accident. AFGE has its interests in having as many public sector federal employees as possible. The more people hired by the government, the more money AFGE makes. And yet there's also this another little wrinkle that federal employees can work for AFGE and get paid by your tax dollars for hours they spend working for the union. And so my piece is talking about a simple, specific way Congress can weaken the power of these public sector unions in reconciliation. It's called taxing this practice of official time. And essentially what Congress can say is, in reconciliation, which only requires 51 votes to pass the Senate, Congress can say we're going to tax the money that the unions gain by the taxpayers paying these federal employees to work for the unions. We're going to tax that at 100% so we can recoup that for the American taxpayer. Right now, we don't even know how much money the unions, the federal workers are getting for time worked for unions because the Biden administration removed the website that revealed this information. And so when you talk about transparency, thankfully the Trump administration is going to bring it back. But this is one of the simple ways Congress can weaken the deep state in reconciliation.
Yeah, and I got another revelation for everyone. We think our federal debt, our national debt is approaching 40 trillion. It's more like 80 trillion because we don't have the money to pay for all the federal worker pensions. And it's not included in that national debt clock. It's just incredible. This is just like medieval times when the aristocrats and the kings emptied the treasuries for their own edification. This is really, really a serious issue. People are not talking about the debt enough. Tyler O'Neill, author of the book Woke-to-Puss. You can get it on Amazon and the other online booksellers. Thanks you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Jake.
All right, coming up, the Democrats and the dishonest mainstream news media keep trying to cast the 6 common sense justices of the Supreme Court as a bunch of religious radicals and right-wing extremists. So what do they do every time there's a decision that proves them wrong? Take a wild guess. David Brody will join American Sunrise Early Edition when we come right back. live shot in Nashville, Tennessee. Oh, there's some people. I was going to ask if it was something I said, like everyone left the streets of Nashville. That's the nicest shot we've had today. Live shot of a lovely town. Good morning, Nashville. Hey, welcome back to American Sunrise Early Edition. I'm Jake Novak. Joining me now from the big show is the great David Brody. And David, I want to talk to you about this because there's two things that happened, or two things that jumped out at me about something that happened at the Supreme Court yesterday that really get me a little excited. First is the Supreme Court overwhelmingly, almost unanimously, decided to uphold the buffer zones, these really large buffer zones that local police are allowed to set up around abortion clinics. Now, I have no problem with that if it's a very loud protest, if it's a very, very aggressive, but you know what these protests are like 99% of the time. It's just prayer vigils. It's just people standing there. And I think that pro-life people are literally having their free speech rights infringed upon by some of these buffer zones. If I were the court, I would be eager to take this case to tell the police they have to show an intimidation aspect of this, something like that. I don't want people being intimidated that's not going to change anything. So I don't really think that's the point. But the other thing that bothers me is the way that the news media covered it. They buried this story. Now, don't go online and say, oh, Jake, they all covered it. Yes, they covered it, but they buried it on page 5006. And the way that they depicted it. They all said it was a divided court. 7-2 when you have a supposedly right-wing court. That's not a divided court. That's a pretty unified court saying they're not going to touch this. There's a lot to go into here, David. I wonder what jumped out at you.
Well, I'm so glad you're bringing this topic up, Jake, because I've been harping on this for a while, this idea that we have a divided court. No, we don't. No, we don't at all. We can go through it here in a second. But first of all, regarding that 7-2 air quote decision, it wasn't really a decision. I mean, it was a decision, but it wasn't a decision on the merits of the case. They only needed four justices to go ahead and take this case up. They couldn't even get four. And I think that should say something about, let's be honest, let's just go right to it, Jake, the John Roberts and the Amy Coney Barretts of the world. Amy Coney Barrett reserving judgment to a degree. Obviously, John Roberts, look, I think the verdict is in. I mean, I'm not calling him David Souter, but he's on his way to maybe not being Souter-like, but close to it. I mean, look, let's remember, go back to abortion, Roe v. Wade, and the reversal there. He did not join the majority. It was a 5-4 decision. He was with the minority on that. We need to remember that John Roberts voted not to reverse Roe v. Wade. So that's important. Amy Coney Barrett is getting wonderful press, from the liberal establishment. As a matter of fact, Ruth Marcus in the Washington Post literally wrote this with the headline, Amy Coney Barrett is no handmaid to the Supreme Court's conservative majority, and then went into lushing praise over Amy Coney Barrett standing up to conservatives. So look, you've got three blocks, right? You got Justice Alito and Thomas, and then you've got Kagan and I'm trying to remember now all of them.
Sotomayor.
Kagan and Sotomayor, thank you, and all of that. And then you've got that squishy middle, right? You got Roberts, Coney Barrett, and let's to a degree Brett Kavanaugh, although he's been pretty good. But he's someone that John Roberts wants to persuade. As a matter of fact, we know the TikTok on this, going back to 2022 with the Roe v. Wade reversal, John Roberts was literally lobbying Brett Kavanaugh to side with the minority, which would have been then the majority on this. So just fascinating to watch.
Yeah, and I just think that, that Ruth Marcus is going to get herself in trouble, though. If she's writing nice things about Amy Coney Barrett, then it's going to be a big problem for her because, again, most of the news media is trying to frighten the American public, and more than just that. I think they're trying to rile the American public up to get really angry at the court. You got 10 seconds. What should we be looking for on the big show, David?
Congressman Mark Alford, Brian Glenn, Gina, Terrance, myself, my ego, we'll all be here. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, the big show. Thank you so much for joining us here on American Sunrise Early Edition. American Sunrise, which goes from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. You got to watch it. It's starting in just a moment. Thanks for joining me here today.
American Sunrise is a great way to start your morning. Join us Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We've got the news of the day and some compelling interviews that you don't want to miss. Here's what you missed from yesterday. Billionaire and Doge chairman Elon Musk says that he wants an email from every federal worker detailing what they accomplished last week.
I don't care, frankly. As long as they're getting the jobs done that President Trump and the American people have charged them with doing, I think that needs to be our focus.
Guys, this is what I've been saying since this first started. I'm very concerned about what the chain of command is here, because the last thing we need here is to have any confusion and, more importantly, any sort of fiefdom wars.
The Roman Catholic world praying for Pope Francis, who of course remains in the hospital this morning, recovering from a bout with early kidney failure, potentially also pneumonia.
Our prayers, of course, are with the Holy Father, as with anyone who is about to meet their Maker. I think Pope Francis is not long for this world.
I was reflecting on the Pope and the current condition he's in, and my mind went to Ecclesiastes 3:11, David, where it says, God has set eternity in our hearts.
President Trump will be back on the world stage today as he and French President Emmanuel Macron will take part in a G7 leader summit call together at the White House.
Look at the amount of world leaders we've had come through this driveway behind me, and it just shows the leadership and the willingness to get things done. And it's obviously today is another example of the Trump administration's moving right ahead.
Israel says it will delay the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, good for them, citing concerns over the recent exchanges related to hostage handovers, which of course they characterize as degrading and cynical because, wait for it, they were.
What we're seeing here is sheer evil. And this is images that the world hasn't seen. In my generation, we think of evil, we look at things from the Holocaust, but I think there is a difference. The difference is during the Holocaust, the Nazis were trying to hide their attempt to murder Jews. Here, those Hamas savages are proud of that.
MSNBC's has canceled Joy Reid's evening show. Ho-ho! The network says a panel-hosted show will be taking its place at 7 o'clock every weeknight. Also, Alex Wagner will not be staying in the 9 p.m. slot Tuesday through Friday. I know you're devastated. Rachel Maddow had been hosting that slot just on Mondays, but then was going to go back to 5 days a week. Because President Trump's doing his 100 days and, Rachel wanted more airtime. The network also expected to announce more changes in the coming days.
David, we all grew up in a system that it was fine to have his liberals and we got along with them, and it's good to have a debate, but not this kind of liberalism and that kind of echo chamber.
Just ahead on American Sunrise, French President Emmanuel Macron buddies up to President Trump in an effort to save face with his countrymen, where he is vastly unpopular. President Trump was gracious but firm. Which leader came out on top in this showdown? Then House Republicans are facing a unity test over President Trump's budget agenda. It's been quite a week for Congress. So what happens if this vote goes forward? Also, the left has planned an economic blackout in an attempt to cancel companies that halted DEI efforts. The left is calling for people to boycott major retailers this Friday who have stopped imposing DEI. Will the corporate conformists react? These stories, so much more as American Sunrise starts right now.
Good morning, America.
Welcome to American Sunrise.
Whether it's culture,
We have breaking news to share with you.
politics,
President Trump is joining us live now from Florida.
we've got you covered.
This is what it looks like to be a patriot.
We have to protect the American family.
The American dream is still alive.
I'm David Brody.
I'm Terrance.
And I'm Dr. Gina. Good morning, everybody. I'm Dr. G. We are live with you from the Palm Beaches. Let's bring in David Brody. He's in Washington, D.C., and T. Bates in our Denver newsroom. Good morning, gentlemen. Interesting day yesterday in politics. So much to talk about, Terrance.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot to talk about, and it's going to continue today. Of course, on Capitol Hill, there's going to be a potential budget vote. We're going to talk about that more. But I think what it really shows is that there might be some cracks in the armor, if you will. Some people have some outstanding concerns. A couple of Congress members have outstanding concerns about that budget. And then, of course, you bring in Elon Musk and that email that he sent. A lot of people still talking about that. More and more department heads telling their federal employees, just ignore that email. David, want to bring you in because you have some ideas about this, and we weren't able to really finish this conversation yesterday. So I do want to give you an opportunity to finish the conversation today, David.
I don't know if I have any ideas necessarily, but I want to hear more ideas or at least understand the chain of command here. And this is why, I mean, Gina and I were talking about this yesterday in the show, and I was mad. And I think Gina asked, who you mad at? Well, I'm mad at not necessarily one person. I'm just mad at the system in terms of what's happening here. Why is Elon Musk sending an email and then all of a sudden Kash Patel and others, and it's not just FBI and state. I know President Trump said that. It's not just those. I mean, you got other agencies doing this as well, saying, hold off, that Musk is, slow your roll, Elon Musk. Like, why is this happening? Like, that's my frustration. Like there's so many other things to get done here, and he's doing such a great job with his chainsaw mentality, Gina, that the last thing we need is agencies saying, no, Elon Musk, you're doing this, you're zigging, we're zagging. That's not what we need. And more to the point, Gina, I'm just concerned about what is the chain of command. Is it Musk? Does he have the final say? Is it a cabinet member, cabinet agency director that has the final say? Is it President Trump, Susie Wild? I mean, I understand President Trump ultimately has the final say, but he's not going through every single thing in the world. He's got other things on his plate. So what's the chain of command? I don't get it, and it's frustrating.
Dr. Gina, I've described it as a potential chink in the armor. I suspect you don't see it that way as a chink in the armor. I'd love to get your perspective there as well.
No, these guys are so smart. And I think they're having a blast with all of this. I don't see it as a chink in the armor. I don't even see it as anyone fighting back against anyone. I think there was some conversation. My understanding is there was some conversation about, people that are working in classified projects can't exactly say, well, last week I did this, this, and this. That's certainly understandable. I don't think it's a big deal at all. Then you look at people like new Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy sending out 5 bullet points of what he did, accounting for himself last week. I think the idea was to figure out, first of all, if these employees even exist, because there are actually people on the employment rolls that taxpayers are paying for that don't even exist. So that was number one. Number two, to see, are they actually even engaged, or did they just float away during COVID and they're still collecting taxpayer money and pass and go, right?
Listen,
I think that was the intention. So David, I agree with you that giving it any kind of attention is a good thing. People, the departments need to respond in some form to Elon's request. I completely agree.
Last word, David.
Yeah, listen, I'm sorry, real quick. I'm all for everything you said, Gina. Obviously, we need all of that. I'm not arguing with the substance here. I'm arguing with this idea that, like, what's going on here? Like, I just, as a reporter, I just want to know what's happening. Like, what's the chain of command? And I'll talk to the White House about that because, I don't know, just a little confused about it.
Yeah, well, I think it was probably more of a suggestion. Anyway, let's check out today's Bible verse. It's from 1 Thessalonians 5:18. In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. That's everything, by the way. Did he say everything? Everything. All right, meanwhile, will House Republicans circle wagons or will they circle fire like they do traditionally? The House GOP planning to bring President Trump's preferred budget resolution, I'll get that out, to the floor for a vote. And that could happen today. This fiscal resolution includes $5 trillion in new spending for initiatives like Trump's border security, for example. However, some Republican members are hesitant to support it. They're saying due to cuts in things like Medicaid and food assistance programs. How is that the role of government, though? All right, well, the outcome of this vote will insinuate the future of the Trump strategy and will be indicative of his ability to rally his troops in future votes. So how will it go? Let's do this. Let's welcome in Congressman Mark Alford from the great state of Missouri. Super Bowl champions, if you do indeed. Anyway, okay, maybe not. Anyway, Congressman, your prediction. Well, it didn't go well, but we can talk like it did because nobody remembers that far back in news anyway. Congressman, will Trump's Congress give him the votes he needs, or will this get dicey? I don't understand the mentality of conservatives to continue to want this welfare state that is a Democrat establishment, right? Why? I mean, let's just at least prescribe some accountability in those arenas, right? Oh, shoot! I made him laugh on the Super Bowl, and then he froze.
He pleads the fifth. He pleads the fifth.
So
Dr. Gina, David.
If I may.
Go ahead, Terrance.
I'm sorry, if I may. I agree with you that it's kind of head scratching, or I've been scratching my head to see some of these defections, particularly over the issue of Medicaid funding. But I will say this. After the fact that our House has kicked the can down the road so many times and for so long, I'm happy that at least they're starting to move forward on something substantive. And let's just be honest, this is just a framework. This isn't the final bill that ultimately we voted on. It's a framework. It's about getting it to the floor to really put some substantive debate on it. And in my mind, that's a win, David. It's unfortunate that I consider that a win, but given from whence we've come, I'm happy that at least we're starting to move forward because we've waited for way too long, way too often to make this happen, David. That's just my 2 cents.
Before you talk, David, I have a question I want to add to your thought process here. Will this thing just get all Christmas treed up and look like every other blasted budget bill we've ever had? I mean, that's my thing. Because then it's not progress, David.
Well, obviously, Christmas trees and Congress go together. There's no doubt. So I think there will be some of that in there. This is a congressional Rubik's Cube. I mean, this is what it is. I mean, the truth of the matter is that the Republicans can't lose one vote. And Tim Burchett is a no on this. Tim Burchett's a no. Publicly, he said no, I'm not voting for it. Victoria Spartz is a no. Let's bring back Congressman Mark Alford as we talk about no's and yeses to this. Congressman Alford, I guess that's the question to you. Where are you at this point? Are you a no or a yes? We got 2 no's publicly. Tom Massey hasn't publicly said no, but he's probably leaning no. That's 3. That's going to sink the deal. And we haven't even talked about moderates who are frustrated with the $880 billion cuts to Medicaid, though we should be clear that that is mostly waste, fraud, and abuse, though there is talk about capping Medicaid as well. Good morning to you, sir, and good luck to you this week.
We had a little technical difficulty there, so I got on my phone to do this. But listen, I'm a yes on this, and here's why. This is a budget resolution that was put together with a budget committee, passed unanimously from Republicans out of budget committee. It is going to get us on the dance floor to the reconciliation process. This is not a perfection bill. the resolution bill is not. It gets us over to the reconciliation process where we can work out these things, where we can renew the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which is going to end up adding revenue to the U.S. Treasury, but it is going to cost some money on the front end until we really realize these tax savings under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And so I'm a yes. I understand the 3 Congress members who have concerns over these potential cuts to Medicaid. But look, we are saving Medicaid dollars. That's what I look at it. We're cutting waste, abuse, and fraud. And we are also making sure that able-bodied adults who do not have any dependent children are out working and not on Medicaid. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I don't think the taxpayers think so either.
Dr. Gina, if you'll allow me, I'm going to ask the question that you just posed right before we brought the congressman on, because I think it is a pertinent question. You say this bill is going to get us on the dance floor. Well, once we're finally tired of dancing and we've got something perfected, is it going to be a bill that's full of pork, that's a Christmas tree bill, and that's watered down from what the American people want? What is your expectation?
Look, I think, the Senate is going to. Well, one of the things we are going to do is we're going to add $100 billion under this to defense, which we are sorely lacking in our defense budget. We're spending more on the interest of our debt right now than we are actually building up our defense capabilities to be an effective deterrent against communist China. I don't see a lot of pork being added onto this from the Senate this go around because we have a Senate that's controlled by the majority party, which is the Republican Party. And the point of the reconciliation process is we don't have to worry about a filibuster. We don't have to worry about the crazy programs that the Democrats have tried to laden these budget programs with in order to get something passed in the House. That's why the reconciliation process is so important, and that's why we need to get it done, as President Trump says, is one big, beautiful bill. Because when push comes to shove, if we try to divide this up and we have to go through this again in summer while we're trying to get back to our homes to do in-district work sessions, it's going to be a disaster. I don't think it would get done.
I think you're right.
Congressman, we all know that President Trump met with Emmanuel Macron yesterday. Right. Just wondering what your take is on that meeting. There was a lot of conjecture about it.
I wish I'm going over to the White House today, actually. He's invited some of the sophomores over, and it'll be my first time over there in the Oval Office. But I wish I could have been there yesterday to see that. I was just looking at the video and the body language. They had this big, I don't know if it's a bromance or what, trying to handshake each other when Macron gets out of the car. It's kind of funny to watch over the years as it develops. But look, I think it's impressive that Macron has come to D.C. to meet with Donald J. Trump. It's clear that Europe needs to do more of its part, especially France and Germany, in meeting their obligations to NATO. Ukraine is a big deal right now, and President Trump is going to get this settled. I had predicted it would happen even before he took the oath of office. It's taken a little bit longer, but we are going to see a deal, if not this week, in the coming weeks, to end this war in Ukraine.
Congressman Mark Alford, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Have fun today at the White House. We'll be thinking of you.
Thank you. All right.
Coming up, we check out the hottest headlines from the RAV newsroom with T. Bates. And later, the Associated Press filed a lawsuit against a trio of Trump admin officials once they were banned from White House access that they have long enjoyed. What's good for the goose? Apparently not so good at all for the leftist gander. How will it end? This story, so much more on American Sunrise.
This news break is brought to you by AMAC, Association of Mature American Citizens.
The Statue of Liberty, or as Joe Biden would say, the statue of, well, come on, you know the thing, that thing. Welcome back, everybody, to American Sunrise. I'm David Brody. All right, coming up, French President Emmanuel Macron did he bring Macrons? Anyhow, he went to the Oval Office. There was Trump. He interrupted Trump at one point. Oh, ho, ho. That was interesting. We're going to dissect that with Brian Glenn here in a moment from the White House. First, though, T. Bates standing by with the very special guest here, and it's all sponsored by AMAC.
The Association of Mature American Citizens is the conservative voice for Americans 50 and older. AMAC is fighting for the values that you hold dear. Join today. Together, we can write the course of America.
The U.S. House is expected to vote on its version of a budget framework as soon as today, despite some Republican holdouts and concerns over Medicaid funding. On the other side of the Capitol, though, Senate Republicans appear to be moving full steam ahead on their budget plan. Let's bring in Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee to discuss. Senator Blackburn, good morning.
Good morning, and it's always good to join you. Thank you.
It is always good to have you. So I'm curious how closely you specifically and your colleagues there in the Senate are watching what's happening in the House and preparing to come up with a counter argument or a counter budget, if you will, to whatever the House Republicans come up with.
Oh, we're watching very closely and we're cheering them on. I appreciated that Speaker Johnson yesterday said, "Pray for us," as he tries to work through this one vote margin. And in his remarks said this was truly a prayer request for the conference. Here's what we know is that we have to be certain that we act on President Trump's agenda. He laid this agenda out. He ran on it. The American people said, "We're with you. We want to cut the size of government. We want to make the Trump tax cuts permanent. We want to build the wall. We want to address crime in this country. We want to return our standing in the world so that our enemies fear us and our allies know that they're our ally." And President Donald Trump is taking action on every one of those. And the budget document, which is simply a framework, and that lays out the process. And now we will begin that reconciliation process. We will work through appropriations. We will have the ability to codify some of these rescissions that DOJ is bringing forward and build that in as a savings for the American people. And Terrance, one of the things we as legislators need to realize, President Donald Trump has a mandate. It is up to us to go bold. He is going bold. So let's not predetermine and say, well, we hope we find $1 trillion or $1.5 trillion or $2 trillion of cuts. We don't know what that ultimate number is going to be. We need to pick them all up. We need to make the necessary rescissions, yield people a savings, and get our fiscal house back in order in this country.
Senator Blackburn, as you and your colleagues go into this reconciliation process, what concessions are you willing to make at the moment? And what are some of your non-starters?
What we want to do is be certain that the Trump tax cuts, the 2017 tax cuts, are made permanent based on current policy, not on law. In 2011, when Barack Obama was president, that is the template that was used to make the Bush tax cuts permanent. We should follow that same process. What we also want to do is make certain that we are cutting the fat out. Terrance, everyone should agree that it is wrong to waste the taxpayer money, and everybody should agree that it is not government money. It is the U.S. taxpayers' hard-earned dollars. They want us to find every wasted penny. and they want us to cut out the waste. They want us to end the fraud. They want to make certain that we are spending wisely so that we secure our nation's sovereignty for our children and grandchildren and future generations.
Absolutely. We'll have to leave the conversation there. Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, we appreciate your time. Always good to talk to you.
Delighted to join you. Thank you.
Thank you. We're back in a moment.
Atlanta, Georgia, the Peach State. Welcome back, everybody, to American Sunrise on a Tuesday. It is Tuesday, right? Just double checking. As we mentioned earlier, everyone, French President Emmanuel Macron, I just like saying that. And by the way, Trump loves the French accent. Did you hear him yesterday? That was hilarious. Anyhow, we met with President Donald Trump at the White House yesterday. The two men focused on one of Europe's main priorities. Of course, that would be peacefully ending the war in Ukraine. However, their differences were on full display in the Oval Office. This was fascinating. Trump was actually interrupted by Macron. Take a look.
I support the idea to have Ukraine first being compensated because they are the one to have lose a lot of their fellow citizens and being destroyed by these attacks. Second, all of those who paid for could be compensated, but not by Ukraine, by Russia, because they were the one to aggress.
Again, just so you understand, Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total effort, and it was through, like the U.S., loans, guarantee, grants, and we provided real money. To be clear, we have 230 billion frozen assets in Europe, Russian assets, but this is not as a collateral of a loan because this is not our belonging. So they are frozen. If at the end of the day, in the negotiation we will have with Russia, they're ready to give it to us, super. It will be loan at the end of the day, and Russia will have paid for that.
If you believe that, it's okay with me. But they get their money back, we don't, and now we do. But, you know, that's only fair.
All right, for more insight, let's welcome in our chief White House correspondent, Brian Glenn, on the North Lawn of the White House this morning. He was in the room there at the White House with Macron and Trump. Brian, I'm curious to get your thoughts about that moment. You know, it's very rare for Trump to be interrupted like that by a world leader. And I do want to say before we hear your comments, for the record, I was researching this morning. President Trump was indeed correct yesterday when he said Europe gave Ukraine loans and will be paid back, because the actual EU Commission website says, quote, the loans will be highly concessional to be repaid in the course of a maximum 35 years starting in 2033. So Trump was correct.
Yeah, 35 years. Let's
yeah,
go
I know.
Sit
Well,
around
that's
and wait
another
for
issue.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also thought it was interesting, David, a reporter asked about whether or not U.S. would contribute to rebuild, or would, as far as the cathedral in the cathedrals in France, too. I think it's really interesting about just the amount of money the U.S. has given everyone. And when you look at Ukraine, rebuilding Ukraine, why should that fall on any more of our tax dollars? It's interesting. Senator Blackburn was just on, and a great interview, by the way, and she's talking about cutting and trim spending and cutting things out. Well, guess what? Funding this war was something that's hugely unpopular by the American people, and so I think President Trump definitely represented that yesterday in the Oval Office, and that was certainly a moment that got a lot of attention there, David.
Brian, another thing that got a lot of attention is that President Trump said that Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, is going to be at the White House within the next couple of weeks, and that he expects some sort of either ceasefire or peace agreement to be signed. So this is moving forward pretty quickly, it sounds like.
It does. And, of course, that's one thing that he's always said he would do. You know, we say this time and time again. It's about leadership. It's about strength. It's about coming up with a plan and a solution. And that's exactly what President Trump is doing. But it's really interesting to see some of the pushback from many in the media about resolving all of this. It's almost like they want to continue funding. The Democrats want to continue to keep adding spending on funding the war in Ukraine, and Democrats are just really committed to that. But at the end of the day, I think that when Zelensky and, of course, perhaps Putin, they all come together, you will see this thing resolved. But, David, to your point earlier, 35 years. I don't think the American taxpayers, we want to wait 35 days until we start to see some of this money or even mineral rights come back in this country.
Brian, it looks like a beautiful day there on the White House lawn. I can tell that you have a little less inclement weather than we had last week when we were there. David, Brody and I were there looking for you over at Pebble Beach, trying to figure out which tent was yours. The really cool thing about being there in the briefing room last week with David was that there was so much independent media, and I had been there during Trump's first term, and that really wasn't the case. It was an amazing thing to see. And now we have the Associated Press's lawsuit against 3 Trump administration officials because of their limited access to said White House events. The lawsuit alleges White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Taylor Budowich, and White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles violated the due process clause of the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and also violated the First Amendment itself to the U.S. Constitution. Now, the AP refused to use the Gulf of America in lieu of the old Gulf of Mexico as prescribed by President Trump in their reporting. So President Trump just simply revoked their media privileges. Independent or non-establishment media have long endured, Brian, maximally discriminatory treatment that had no impetus whatsoever. So will the Trump administration win in their court effort to ban these establishment media who are not accurately reporting the news?
I think they will, and I love that setup, Dr. Gina. And by the way, in the briefing room right now this morning, I walked in there just to kind of do my daily walkthrough, and the Gulf of America is displayed on the 2 big monitors, and it says across victory. And so that's pretty interesting on that. And I will say this, if there's any rights they violate, I'll just suggest this. There's a big 12-foot black wrought iron fence right outside the White House. They're more than welcome to go stand out there and do their First Amendment right, but you don't have a right to come in here. There's nowhere in the Constitution that says you have the right to be in that room over there. That's what's called a privilege, and people need to be reminded of that. So ultimately, will they be successful? I don't think so.
Nah, 100%. By the way, 60 degrees.
No.
60 degrees
Beautiful.
today in D.C. It's going to be.
Is that what it says? Let me check my app.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's
There
going to
you
be
go,
like
60
58
degrees.
or something. But I decided to round up, and I don't care about facts. But Brian, Glenn, great to have you, by the way. Good to
Yeah.
see you.
Good to
Yep.
see you, Brian.
Thank you. Good to see you guys. Yep. Good morning, everybody.
All right. Good morning. Coming up, doctors warn that we may be facing the worst flu season in decades as cases continue climbing across the country. Those details are ahead. Plus, the left plans a boycott of companies that scaled back DEI efforts. Have they not realized that once you go woke, let's say it together, you go broke? That story and more as American Sunrise continues.
Welcome back to American Sunrise. I'm Dr. G. Thank you for joining us. Time now for today's health news. It is sponsored by The Wellness Company, of course, and Under the Microscope. Are plant-based restaurants actually healthy? Well, the study was published by the journal Nutrients, which examined the menus of restaurants to see whether plant-based meals at restaurants are indeed healthier. Did they use seed oils? Did they pack in the carbs to replace the meat taste? And do they resort to simple sugars to replace flavor? Well, here's what they learned. The researchers went to 561 different restaurants. More than a quarter of the restaurants had no healthy plant-based meals at all. Researchers also found out 2 restaurants actually mislabeled dishes that were truly containing animal products, and they said they were vegan. Many of the restaurants studied used carbs and simple sugars to replace tasty meats. Many also used dangerous seed oils and unhealthy glyphosates or pesticides like Roundup that are banned, by the way, in other countries instead of organic products that don't use those pesticides. Many also use dangerous preservatives and dyes that are also banned in other countries and have been shown to cause cancer. Only 2% scored a 10. So even if the menu says plant-based, that doesn't mean it's healthy at all. In fact, you may be consuming fewer whole foods than if you just ate the meat to begin with. In conclusion, nutritional transparency remains a challenge. Bring in RFK. All right. It's a new day in America and a new administration in Washington, D.C. A lot of excitement and optimism about the future. A lot of work to be done, though, especially when it comes to fixing our very broken healthcare system. The forces responsible for breaking it aren't going to just fade away. The challenges our system faces won't disappear overnight. So now more than ever, be prepared. That's where the Wellness Company comes in. Their doctors are medical professionals. You can trust them and their line of prescription medical kits, the gold standard when it comes to keeping you safe and healthy. Whether it's the medical emergency kit, the contagion kit, the first aid kit, the travel kit, these prescription kits contain an assortment of life-saving medication and guidebooks to assist in the proper use of them. From the flu to strep to COVID to bird flu, a trip to the beach, a trip overseas, the Wellness Company has a prescription kit designed to keep you safe. Make America healthy again, guys. It starts at home. Do your part, protect the health of your family. Go to twc.health/RAV. That's twc.health/RAV. Use the promo code RAV. That'll save you 10%. We all know we don't want any more vaccines, but what about all of the media hype over bird flu? Here to discuss, Dr. Ben Tapper. He's director of epigenetics at the Wellness Company. Recently, Joel Salatin, one of the nation's leading freedom-fighting agricultural experts, said that we don't need another vaccine for the bird flu. What we need are chickens with natural immunity, which is, of course, natural immunity is caused by developing the antibodies by actually getting the virus and then getting over it. That's why he believes they should not be culling these chickens who survive a bird flu outbreak. Doctor, this would mean our egg prices wouldn't be insane. This sounds totally logical to those of us who recently witnessed all of the COVID lies. But what is the risk?
Well, let's go back and think about this for a second. I mean, the number one thing that we have to understand is that most of this avian flu is coming from the industrial farms. It is not coming from the pasture-raised farms here. I mean, by government decree, if you have healthy chickens in these industrial farms, by their definition, we need to cull off all these birds. So if you have 1,000 chickens or 100,000 birds in these farms and 1,000 of them get sick, by their decree, they kill off and exterminate all 100,000 birds, not just the sick ones, but also the healthy ones. And that makes zero sense. In these farming industries, what we need to do is we need to breed with the ones that survived and build the immunity of the healthy birds. How do they survive? Let the ones die off. I mean, this is just nature. This is the survival of the fittest. We need to not stop interfering with these, but really look at how we're raising these birds. These are birds they're in an unhygienic, concentrated feeding operation, and it's not how God really designed these birds to be. We need to let them be pasture raised and give them good nutrition. And these birds, make no mistake, they're heavily vaccinated, they're medicated, and they're in these concentrated feeding operations, and they do get sick. Make no mistake, but really we need to revamp the environment for them. That is an epigenetic model, environmental model. And look at Joe Selton. He has a pasture raised farm, and his birds are the healthiest they can be. They're out, they're getting fresh air, they're getting good nutrition. They're not getting this GMO grain, and that in itself is going to cause problems for these birds. But again, we can't give into this fear model. We need to revamp the model. The solution here is not just more vaccines and more medications here for these birds. It really is just the environment. You change the environment for these birds, and they will be healthy.
You make such a great point. You know, the left is so Darwinian until it comes to actually putting the practice in that you're saying, like natural immunity, natural, and the ways that we do evolve, because there are some, although his theory was very flawed, as we all know. But anyway, medical experts are saying this is the worst year for the seasonal flu since 2010. And the cases are rising across the country, expected to continue. Some of these cases of flu or whatever this is, though, they seem abnormal, doctor. They result in secondary infections. I'm still fighting an infection I got more than a month ago. Is this some other China-created virus? Where are we going with this?
Well, again, I think there's a lot to unpack here. I think there's more stress now than ever before. I think people are more nutritionally bankrupt than ever before. I mean, we're more toxic and deficient than ever before. And really, we need the solution here is to move away from toxicity and deficiency into purity and sufficiency. We're not getting that 30 minutes of summer sunlight right now. And really, the flu season is really a vitamin D deficiency season. Unless we're getting 30 minutes of summer sunlight, we will be deficient in vitamin D. So the key here is to really supplement, take care of the body, We need to eat well. We need to move well, think well, pray well. We can be well. And really getting that vitamin D supplementation is in my opinion, one of the best things you can do at this time of year. And really the amount of vitamin D that the CDC and everyone, the three-letter organizations tell you is a very low amount of vitamin D. It's based off body weight. We should be taking 40 IUs of vitamin D per pound of body weight to be sufficient. And so that is really the key here. And really getting good sleep, good rest. We need to move well, eat well, think well, pray well, and we can be well.
I love that, actually. And, you know, some of the things we're reading about now, just like spending time outside, you know, these are all things that came out of COVID, but there's a lot of bad that came out of COVID, too. So I want to ask you, there's a lot of talk about Trump and RFK actually removing the COVID vaccine from the market. Look, the COVID vaccine killed my dad and a lot of other people I know. So I'm really interested if you think this will happen.
You know, I sure hope so. It should have never been on the market, and first and foremost. We have mRNA technology that's never been seen before. This technology has been shown to cause a depletion in bifidobacterium, which is the main bacteria in the colon responsible for absorption and many other functions in the body. And, you know, and so not only that, the clotting issues. I've been in the vaccine realm for a very long time. Not once did I ever hear the clotting issues at this caliber. So we have, you know, a real problem with these vaccines. mRNA vaccines it's not just a normal standard vaccine. This is genetic therapy, gene therapy, make no mistake. They are trying to tap in and be able to control disease and turn it off and turn it on. And I think that, you know, big pharma doesn't have much integrity, and I really don't trust them anymore. I really never did. But if you have the ability to turn on disease, you'll be able to turn on profits. But I think mRNA has one side where people are behind it. It sounds good on paper, like, wow, you'll be able to turn off disease. But make no mistake, we're playing God with these vaccines. And it is really a dangerous and slippery slope. It needs to be off the market, and it really needs to be investigated. But the problem is we're not looking at the data, and there's so much profit that has been made. They're trying to protect these industries. And we have government subsidies for these vaccines, and that's a real problem, too. We need to get rid of these government subsidies, and it's interfering with our free market.
100%. So much is, hopefully we can fix this broken healthcare and food system. Dr. Ben Tapper, thanks for being with us. Thanks for what you do at the Wellness Company, too.
Yeah, thank you. God bless.
God bless. Coming up, an event at Trump's Mar-a-Lago that will give thanks to God, the Catholic Prayer for America Gala. John Yep, the CEO of Catholics for Catholics, joins the show to discuss. But next, DOJ discovers more D.C. waste. And why did USAID work against American interests? We're going to tell you right back in just 2 minutes.
All right, time now to stay awake, not woke. It's brought to us by the 1775 Coffee Company. You're drinking coffee every day, probably right now, but have you ever asked where it comes from or where your money goes? Well, in 2024, Starbucks' top political contribution went to Kamala Harris. Big brands hate your values. That's the truth, and that's why we drink 1775 coffee on American Sunrise. As a matter of fact, there it is, proof in the pudding. L'chaim. Anyhow, you should too, by the way. 1775 coffee roasted in Florida by patriots for patriots, sourced from small farms in Bolivia, not massive industrial factories. Small farms, small batches, fresh roasts every month mean you're going to taste and feel the difference. I do. I have it every morning. And only, by the way, get fresh beans in your cup. We should point that out as well. So try their dark or medium roast for bold flavor, a smooth finish, zero acidity. At my age, I'll take zero acidity. So do you need an extra morning boost? Their mushroom coffee blend. It's the best tasting out there. It's made to fuel your mind. And if you're a K-cup drinker, I am. Don't worry. These have real coffee inside. I've looked, by the way. No freeze-dried stuff. So go to 1775coffee.com/RAV. Use code RAV for 10% off your order. We are obsessed with this coffee over here at Real America's Voice. I have it every day at like 3 in the morning. No, I don't. I'm not up that early. We do swear by it here in the newsroom. Get your coffee today at 1775coffee.com/RAV to support the show and have the best tasting cup of coffee in your life. Use code RAV for 10% off now. I swear by it. It's great coffee. And now that we're caffeinated, time to stay awake, not woke. And therefore, we go to T. Bates because he never puts us to sleep. He always keeps us awake. Hello, Terrance.
L'chaim, to quote you, l'chaim. I don't even know what
I don't
that
know
means,
where
but it
l'chaim
sounds
came. Cheers to life, to life. All right.
Oh my God, I love that. Like I was kind of just like, oh, I like that. Okay. All right,
That's
David,
called an
so
ad
look,
lib.
That's and I love it. I love you for it. There's a planned boycott scheduled for this Friday. It aims to target companies that have reduced their commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. In fact, organizers of this boycott are expressing concern that these companies are undermining progress on social justice issues by scaling back their DEI efforts. The planned boycott is gaining momentum as activists push for accountability from corporations that have publicly supported DEI in the past. President Trump, of course, has already taken action to eliminate federal DEI programs, and now many of these companies are following suit. The question here is that DEI has proven not to work. But David, I'm not even so sure that that's the bigger question. It seems to me that many of these companies are simply doing what's politically expedient. They weren't necessarily committed either way. They're doing whatever the prevailing political winds push them to do.
The almighty dollar. You're absolutely right. And by the way, on this DEI stuff, have these folks that are going to protest on Friday, have they not read the news? Have they not seen the mandate? Have they not seen the polls? I mean, DEI, not exactly the most popular thing in America right now, so knock yourself out with the boycott. But this feels a little bit like the Democrats protesting USAID. You know, we want more waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, it kind of feels like that to a degree. But I think, Terrance, it goes to a larger issue, which shows you that the far left in this country is out of touch with what's going on. And that's been a long time coming. And quite frankly, here we go back to Biden, and we can talk about Biden and Obama, but really, if you think about it, it does kind of go back to both of them, but specifically Biden, because Biden had a decision to make. He could have gone with the moderate center, which is where he was for about 30 years or so in his career, or he could have gone with the progressive left when he became president, and he went with the progressive left. And it was the demise of him, not to mention his mental facilities, or faculty, excuse me. But beyond that, he went with the far left, and so that was a problem for him, for Kamala Harris, for the Democrat Party, and these folks that are going to boycott on Friday. It's going to be a problem for them. I can't imagine this is going to go anywhere, but we'll see.
Well, we shall see. We shall absolutely see. Coming up here on American Sunrise, previews of a massive Catholic event happening at Mar-a-Lago, what the faith-filled event is all about, and how you can attend. We'll have the details ahead here on American Sunrise. And later, the drama intensifies at NBC and MSNBC as more high-profile anchors are exiting stage left. So, is the network hemorrhaging anchors due to the Trump presidency? We'll discuss. First, though, a quick look at this day in history.
chance of him going winning now.
They might be stopping it. That might be all, ladies and gentlemen. Get up there, Joe. Get up there. Get up in the ring.
I shocked the world. I shocked the world. It was on this date in 1964 that a young 22-year-old Cassius Clay, later known as Muhammad Ali, pulled off the biggest upset in boxing history. He knocked out Sonny Liston for his first world title. A crowd of about 8,300 people at the Convention Hall Arena in Miami Beach, Florida, watched the 7th round technical knockout. The odds makers had Liston over Ali by an 8-1 margin. Ali predicted that he would float like a butterfly and sting like a bee, and he did just that to begin his journey towards being one of the 20th century's greatest sports icons. In November of 2005, Ali was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. We're back in a moment.
And calls to the other guy, Ali. Catch me if you can. He says I'm the greatest the world's ever seen. God bless the USA.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
All right, welcome back to American Sunrise. I'm Dr. G. It is time now for our moment of faith, brought to us by the great folks at Lee Greenwood and the God Bless the USA Bible. In focus today, the second annual Catholic Prayer for America Gala. This is happening at the home of President Donald Trump, right over here at Mar-a-Lago. It is set for March 19th, the feast day of St. Joseph. Power prayer is real, and this big event will showcase how prayer is at the heart of what makes America great. Let's welcome in John Yep. He is the CEO of Catholics for Catholics. Welcome. I want to talk about this gala, but before we do, I am just dying to ask you about the situation of the Pope, with the Pope. I know that you have spent a lot of time there in Rome at the Vatican. Give us insight.
Spent 5 years there in Rome, was there actually when the Holy Father, Pope Francis, was actually named, so stood right there when the smoke came out and got to see it firsthand. So we have followed this pontificate very closely, and it's all eyes should be right now on Rome, even if you're not Catholic, because the significance of the Pope on just a geopolitical scale is really enormous. So we need to just keep praying for the Pope, especially for the repose of his, or for his soul, ultimately, if God's going to call him home now during this time. So yes, thank you for asking about that. And it's an important time for Catholics and also non-Catholics alike.
I love how you will have more priests and nuns at this event than I believe have ever gathered at Mar-a-Lago, certainly, perhaps at any major political event. What does this tell us about the direction our culture is headed from a faith perspective?
Look, the hardest workers, the hardest patriots are usually those who have a strong prayer life and love their God and their country. And we saw that in the last election. Catholics for Catholics, our group that's putting this on for the second year in a row. We're not just sitting in churches praying all day. We worked so hard to get President Trump elected. We gave him the largest Catholic landslide in U.S. history, 58 to 40%. So we're coming back to his house, first and foremost to thank, our God and him for the tremendous work that he's doing for America. And yes, you said it, thanks in part to Cameron Moore, a great friend of ours and American Heroes Association, they have come up with a crazy idea to basically flood Mar-a-Lago with 100 Catholic priests. So we're grateful that they are sponsoring those priests to be able to come. They are men who oversee large congregations all throughout the United States. And our message of prayer and action is going to get out there on March 19th.
Well, John, I'll tell you what, I wish I had more time with you because I really wanted to ask you about Catholic Charities and some of the damage and destruction they've done.
Oh, my gosh, that's a whole can of worms there. It has to be. We're going to talk about it on the 19th, I guarantee you.
Okay, all right. Well, people will have to tune into that. Where can they find your work?
So just Google Catholics for Catholics. You're going to see that come up right away for that site, or just Google Catholic Prayer for America Gala in Mar-a-Lago. You're going to want to be there. Tickets are selling very quickly, and it's an important moment to gather as a country after this election.
Yeah, my daughter's getting married in Ireland, or I would certainly be there at your event. Thank you so much for coming on with us. John Yep, Catholics for Catholics, back with the second hour of American Sunrise in 2.
Introducing the limited edition God Bless the USA Bible, inspired by Lee Greenwood's hit song and the most recognized patriotic anthem in America, God Bless the USA. The God Bless the USA large print leather-bound King James Bible also contains America's founding documents, the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and the Pledge of Allegiance, along with a handwritten chorus to Lee Greenwood's song, God Bless the USA. With its large print and slim design, this Bible invites you to explore God's Word anywhere, anytime. The God Bless the USA Bible makes the perfect gift and cherished family heirloom keepsake to pass on to future generations. Designed for an easy reading experience in the trusted King James Version translation, this large print Bible is perfect to take to church, Bible study, work, and for traveling. Order yours today at GodBlessTheUSABible.com.
All right, coming up on the second hour of American Sunrise, President Trump met with French President Emmanuel Macron at the White House yesterday. It seemed cordial, but what happened behind the scenes? Plus, a federal judge blocked Doge from getting information from the Department of Education. What will this mean in a time when educational reform is so crucial and timely? And finally, another one bites the dust. More establishment media falling before our eyes. NBC announced a major programming shakeup to its flagship show, NBC Nightly News. We have this story and so much more as the second hour of American Sunrise starts right now.
Good morning, America.
Welcome to American Sunrise.
Whether it's culture,
we have breaking news to share with you.
Politics.
President Trump is joining us live now from Florida.
We've got you covered.
This is what it looks like to be a patriot.
We have to protect the American family.
The American dream is still alive.
I'm David Brody.
I'm Terrance.
And I'm Dr. Gina.
Welcome back to the second hour of American Sunrise, everybody. I'm David Brody coming to you from D.C. Where am I? D.C. That's right. Let's bring in Dr. G. She's in West Palm Beach. Terrance Bates in our Denver newsroom. Good morning to both of you. And Gina, can I just say that every morning I look at what's coming up at the White House and I see 3 p.m. Eastern, Donald Trump, shockingly the president, signing more executive orders. I call it story time in America. And it really is like a grab bag. Like, what's in there today, Gina? You never know.
And Brian says it's going to be saucy today, everybody.
Oh,
so,
I like
I want to say, last week was so cool, David, to be there with you. David Brody, by the way, is such a veteran news journalist. He knows the parts of the White House and the West Wing that nobody even knows. He took me down to these rooms where there was the establishment media was all down there looking at us like, who let you in? We're like, oh, we live here now, kind of a thing. And it was the coolest thing. I'd been in the West Wing a lot of times. I had never been down into that. I think you call it the lower press area. It was so fantastic and just rewarding to see Rav faces all over the place.
And real quick, Terrance, I just want to say, I know you can cross it off your bucket list now. We ran into Caitlin Collins at CNN.
Yes, we did.
And I know that is now off your bucket list. So
she has an amazing coat.
Dr. G.
Did you notice her coat? She had a Valentino coat. It was really beautiful.
Okay, I had no idea. Sorry.
I had to say something nice. My
radar.
grandma said, if you can't say something right, so I had to say something nice.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah.
All right. And we'll leave it right there, Dr. Gina. Despite what appear to be good intentions, Elon Musk and Doge's efforts to force federal workers to prove their efficiency or face losing their jobs, creating more problems than solutions. Despite President Trump's support for Musk's recent email asking government workers to explain what they did last week or resign, the agency that oversees federal workers is telling those workers to ignore the communication from Musk. Adding insult to injury on Monday, a federal judge also blocked Doge from accessing sensitive information at the Department of Education and the Office of Personnel Management. In the meantime, many federal workers remain unsure about their future employment, and that uncertainty is reportedly spilling over to private companies who do business with the government. Some are laying off employees and deferring payments to vendors in anticipation of potential impacts from Doge. President Trump says he expects a ceasefire or a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine to be signed within the next couple of weeks. While his team has been negotiating with the Russians, the commander-in-chief plans to host Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House in the coming weeks to make everything official.
We're working on deals right now, transactions right now, and in particular, the big one is to get the war stopped, whether it's ceasefire or direct to an agreement. I'd like to go directly to an agreement, but ceasefire will always happen a little bit quicker.
And after meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron at the White House yesterday, President Trump also affirming that Europe is becoming increasingly willing to foot the bill for the cost of the war in Ukraine. He also doubled down on his position that NATO countries in Europe should be the main actors in securing Europe from the Russians, not the United States. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents are continuing operations to round up illegal aliens who are also dangerous criminals. In the meantime, several states are also considering legislation to help in that effort. The Arizona State Legislature, for instance, is set to vote on a bill that would offer bounties for the arrests of illegals in order to support the president's immigration policies. Under Arizona's so-called bounty bill, police officers would be paid $2,500 for every illegal immigrant they help deport. Money to pay those bounties would be raised by taxing international money transfers. The measure is believed to have a good chance of passing in Arizona's Republican-led House and Senate, despite sharp criticism from civil rights groups as well as immigrant advocacy organizations. That's a quick check of your headlines. I'll have more headlines coming your way here in just a little bit, but now let's get you back over to Dr. Gina and David.
Hey, Terrance, appreciate it. So DOJ has been very busy reining in the federal government, obviously, and finding waste and abuse inside federal agencies, as we detail every single day. Elon Musk warned federal workers that if they do not return to the office, they will be placed on administrative leave. President Trump signed an executive order for workers to return to the office. And then the latest, like days of our lives, Musk sent out emails for federal workers to put in writing what they did last week. Sounds simple enough. Musk initially said any employee who did not answer would be effectively resigning. So agencies like the State Department, the DOJ told, and many others told their employees that they could ignore those emails from Musk's team. President Trump had an answer to all of this. Take a look.
That was done in a friendly manner. Only things such as perhaps Marco at State Department, where they have very confidential things, or the FBI, where they're working on confidential things. And they don't mean that in any way combatively with Elon. They're just saying there are some people that you don't want to really have them tell you what they're working on last week. But other than that, I think everyone thought it was a pretty ingenious idea. We have to find out where these people are. Who are they? And we said, if you don't respond, we assume you're not around.
And that holds, that stands.
And you're not getting paid anymore, too. So, you know, we're doing a real job.
All right, so for more, let's bring in RAV Chief White House Correspondent Brian Glenn from the North Lawn of the White House. Brian, good to see you on a very sunny 60-degree day eventually there. So what more can you tell us about where everything stands with DOJ getting access to everything it needs? And what's interesting to me, Brian, here is that, and I'm still trying to figure it out, you got the Defense Department saying you can ignore Elon Musk's request, but you have HHS with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. saying, no, comply with the request. I don't know. I'm confused, but then again, me being confused isn't really shocking to anybody, Brian.
Well, I'm with you on that. I'm a little confused myself. I do like President Trump's response to that, though, saying that obviously there's people that simply cannot tell them what they're working on and what they plan on working on tomorrow. That makes sense. And I always like to go, well, in the private sector, you know, this is what corporations do every day. This is what salespeople have to do every day as well, is talk about what they're doing. But there is that fine line. Now, on my way to the White House today, I noticed my Uber driver was listening to some local talk radio, and guess what the topic was? How to deal with workplace anxiety. Not making this up. It's so, this is the third story I've seen in the last 24 hours about anxiety. So perhaps having to respond and be accountable for what you do every day is putting a level of anxiety on some of these government workers. We get to show up to the office. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. And it also, you know, makes people, if they're working 2 or 3 jobs on the side, makes them, you know, focus on the government. But the email, that's a little, it's got some mixed lines there. So, but I do like the way President Trump laid that out yesterday.
Brian, the tagline for this administration could very easily be promises made, promises kept. And when it comes to the war in Ukraine, it looks like President Trump keeping that promise of ending it as well. He, of course, met with French President Macron yesterday at the White House, and also saying during that meeting that he expects Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to meet him at the White House in short order.
Yeah, that's going to be an amazing trip when that happens, and I'm sure it will bring out all kinds of protesters and people that are obviously against Zelensky, and a lot of people that are for continuing the war in Ukraine. But you know, it's interesting. I'd like to know what the French people feel about this war. Are they overwhelmingly for ending it just like the American people are. I'm really curious. I would have asked President Macron about that. But, promises made, promises kept. You talk about DOGE and shrinking the size of the government, talk about ending the foreign war, talk about closing the border. These are all things that President Trump have done. Now, going back to DOGE real quickly, tomorrow at 11 a.m. local time, USAID takes the center stage, and they've been a little bit of a programming note on this. They have switched venues from being in a subcommittee room in the Rayburn building to actually being in one of the rooms in the Capitol to accommodate the amount of press and the amount of people that are going to show up to this thing. This is going to be straight fire. That's tomorrow at 11 o'clock, but that should give you an idea. So if we didn't have enough to talk about DOGE today, just wait till Thursday morning when we see the fallout from that 11 o'clock hearing there.
Yeah, and Brian, to the point, I really delved into this because David and I kind of got into this conversation yesterday about what's going on between Elon, asking for these emails. I just don't think it's too much to ask for employees to at least respond to an email. I think the basic idea was a response. If you don't respond, right, then, you can say, I dealt with classified information all last week. That's a fine thing to say. You don't have to say what the classified information was, but you need to be accountable to your employer. It's not too much to ask. And apparently, Brian, there's a significant percentage of taxpayer-funded government employees who have literally not been to work or are not even alive anymore since COVID that we're still paying. It's okay to ask for an email, right?
No. It's perfectly okay. Let me tell you something. If any of our direct supervisors right now, and I want them to do this, please email me right now and ask what I'm going to do today and what I plan on doing tomorrow. I'm going to respond because A, it's the respectful thing to do and I enjoy my job, but B, that's just what it is being a responsible employee. So, Dr. Gina, you're right. It's not too much to ask to say, you know what, I'm working on some very highly classified stuff, blah, 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 and respond out of respect. Yeah. But I think it's the lack of respect is why they're not doing it. They don't respect Elon. They don't respect President Trump, so they're just pushing back on it.
I think that's exactly right, Brian. And I really don't care if they have anxiety. Let me say that. I really don't care. Because you know what? Jobs are stressful. You know what? When the news cycle changes at 5 o'clock every night because President Trump sends down 25 more fantastic EOs, right? It's stressful. But we love it. It's what we're charged with doing, and we're responsible to it. Yes.
Yeah, they didn't mind whenever a lot of people were laid off because of not getting the vaccine. They didn't complain about those job layoffs. They didn't complain about the 1,750 people for Southwest Airlines and the corporation in Dallas. They just got whacked. Where's all the outrage for that? But all of a sudden you're asked to be accountable for your job, and that's all of a sudden a big problem. I don't get it.
Yeah, I love how Sean Duffy sent a bullet in response to Elon. He says, Sean Duffy, new Secretary of Transportation, sent a bullet points. This is what I did last week.
Brian, I'm going to send it right now to the Zen Master.
That's right.
I'm going to send my email right now on the air. Let's all do it. Let's all grab our phones and we're
my phone, Zen.
But
I'm going to do it right now too.
Let's call it.
Zen, I know you're watching or you're in the Getter chat.
Job.
I'm really, really, really busy, Zen.
Yeah. I'm just going to type back to Zen. I bloviate for 2 hours, Monday through Friday. And then just sincerely, David Brody. Great to see you, Brian Glenn.
Thanks, Brian.
Appreciate it.
By the way, great wardrobe up and down Pebble Beach here, Dr. Gina. You're right. Great jackets. Everyone, it's like a star-studded event walking up and down here.
You can watch all day.
Spot on one there. Yeah.
Wardrobe watch here on American Sunrise. Thank you, Brian Glenn. All right, coming up, Mexico says it's sending more troops to the southern border. What can we expect from the added reinforcements? We're going to break all of that down in a moment. But first, the House Subcommittee on DOGE, Brian was just talking about that, holding this big hearing tomorrow on USAID, now moved to the Capitol. Here we go. A closer look at that as American Sunrise returns after the break. Welcome back to American Sunrise. I'm David Brody. Great to have you with us this morning. All right, time now to drain the swamp. This morning, we're continuing to flush out USAID. They need a good flushing, and Elon Musk has been giving them a good flushing. The Doge House Subcommittee having this hearing on USAID tomorrow. It's going to lay out how USAID was working against American interest. The subcommittee chairwoman, Marjorie Taylor Greene, says what they have uncovered is going to shock the American people. And they're going to be offering solutions to ensure things like this never happen again. The White House released a list of items USAID was funding. I mean, I could go on and on. We don't have time to list them all. But how about this? A DEI musical in Ireland. You got DEI efforts in Serbia. What? And a transgender comic book in Peru. Let's bring in Terrance and Gina. Terrance, I'm assuming you have read that transgender comic book. Is that true? Can you confirm or deny? I cannot. I mean, I have not seen it yet. No, I'm sorry, Terrance. I didn't mean it that way. Oh, I just insulted. We are now...
Unfortunately, I'm tethered here. Really? Wow, we're doing it like that on a Tuesday morning.
I meant to be sarcastic. I was trying to be a little bit... Anyhow, it didn't quite work, Terrance. I'm so sorry. I know you don't read transgender comic books. I just want to go on the record with that.
And it's not getting any better. It's not getting any better.
Let's change
Let me just stop talking.
Shall we?
Go ahead.
I yield the floor to the gentlewoman from Missouri by way of Florida and California.
No pressure. No pressure from here. What was the topic again? No, I'm kidding.
I have no clue.
Can we go back to the
I actually had
wardrobe
something
on
of
Pebble
substance
Beach?
to say about USAID, Dr. Gina, but that's out the window now. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, Terrance, anything of substance I had to say is pretty much gone, too.
I've ruined this segment. I'm sorry.
You did, David.
So I will say this seriously about USAID, if you allow me here. This is good. Like, we already know some of the, and I'm just going to call them abuses, that have happened in terms of financing under USAID. And one of the things, and I talked to Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene about this, one of the things that she wants to do with her committee is not just uncover the abuses, but put into law, put mechanisms in place to control these abuses and make sure they don't happen again. And I think that is critical. Uncovering the fraud, waste, and abuse is one thing, and yes, the people, the American people deserve to know that, but then ensuring that it doesn't happen again and making sure there are mechanisms in place to protect the American people and our taxpayer dollars, I think that is ultimately critical, Dr. G.
You know, one of the interesting things, a lot of my friends are balancing invitations to go into the administration, right? You go into government work and you're going to make $100,000, maybe $200,000, which sounds like a lot of money until you try to get an apartment in Washington, D.C. And then you quickly find out that's barely livable. And they can't do it. You know why? Because they have to dissolve all the private stuff they're doing. So then, and this does relate to USAID, believe it or not. So then you think about people like, I don't know, Joe Biden, who spent the last 180 trillion years of his life in government work, making $250,000, and yet he's worth how many tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars? You look at people like Kamala Harris and people like that, people who are wearing amazing designer coats worth more than many people's cars, who work in news media, and all of a sudden, all this stuff about USAID makes so much sense, as does Trump derangement syndrome, as does Elon derangement syndrome. This all begins to make a lot of sense because they've all been on the take. They've all figured out how to make government pay them for being in government or in media. And you guys, that's what this has been about from the very beginning. And USAID, I have a feeling, is just one of the mechanisms that has made all these people tremendously wealthy.
Great point. I'm going with an economy of words because I feel like I've totally ruined the segment right from the beginning.
I'm going to meet you at the monkey bars after school.
I'm going to be a robot. That's right. Coming up on American Sunrise, I will just read like this. Kamala Harris is back with more word salad. We have her latest remarks. But first, new ICE operations in L.A. are underway. We have an update next on American Sunrise.
Santa Monica Pier there. Looks like a fun place to go. In fact, maybe this summer I'll take the family out there to Santa Monica. Be a fun little area. Actually, San Diego is really more of our favorite destination here. Sorry, I'm just kind of opining, talking about my personal plans for the summer. Anyway, we're getting you ready for the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. In fact, in order to be able to afford that sort of vacation, I might need to invest well. Right now, things looking pretty good on the Dow and on the S&P 500. The NASDAQ, however, is in the red, as is gold, silver, and crude oil. We'll take you to the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange here in just a few minutes and let you know how things are ultimately shaping up there. But now, let's get you back over to David. And we're not talking about any more comic books. You're banned from that.
No, we're done with that. Quickly, we're done with that. Thank you, T. Appreciate it. All right. Now to the border, where in California there are new immigration enforcement operations currently taking place near Los Angeles. It isn't quite known how many illegal aliens were detained in these new ICE operations, but they've been carrying them out. And those similar operations in Chicago, New York, Boston, I mean, name a big city, it's going on. Los Angeles, like other Democrat-run cities, have enacted sanctuary city policies for illegal aliens. For more, let's bring in Terrell County Sheriff, Texas Sheriff, Thaddeus Cleveland. Sheriff, thanks for being here. So you come from a state that obviously works with ICE and Border Patrol officials. Can you walk us through what these operations have been like across the country and give our viewers a sense of how this is kind of carried out, if you will?
Hey, good morning, David, and thank you for having me back on.
Good morning.
And, when we look at the current operations that are going on, and this is ICE ERO, their enforcement removal operation, fugitive operation. This is what they do. They go out in our communities and look for those criminal aliens or those aliens that have overstayed their visas or have been ordered deported. Right now, what they're apprehending, it is being touted in the media as successful, which it is. However, they're targeted operations, David. That's what we have to understand. They're not just going out there grabbing anybody they can, because if they were, apprehensions would be much higher. But they're working with the whole of government approach, FBI, DEA, Secret Service, Border Patrol, and then, of course, here in Texas, as you mentioned, even we have state police assisting them. But they're targeting individuals, those, as I mentioned, that are either criminals or who have been ordered deported and getting them off the street.
Yeah, and you're right there on the border there with Mexico. What does it look like there in your county specifically? And when you say sharing information, like how does that work exactly? Like who goes to who? Do they come to you? Do you go to them? Or what's that flow of exchange and information like?
Well, first of all, David, I spent 26 years in the Border Patrol, and even before I became a Border Patrol agent, I tell you, here in the state of Texas, I had a grandfather that was sheriff. Partnerships have always existed, and we're really seeing those maximized now, whether it's through grant funding and just doing what's right. So having been the patrol agent in charge of the station here, we worked with our local law enforcement, our local sheriffs, our state agencies, but we continue to work together, specifically out here in these rural areas where we're really dependent on each other, because at times Border Patrol may be the first responders to an accident on the highway, or me and my deputies, we may be the first responders to a landowner that has illegal aliens on his property. But look, we live together, we hang out together in the same communities. We also share intel and information through what's called our Joint Operations Intelligence Centers, and that's co-located at Border Patrol headquarters, like out at each sector headquarters here in Texas. And we have weekly teleconferences, and we talk about what's going on, where we can assist, and things of that nature. But it truly is a partnership out here in Texas, and Texas continues to make sure we push that forward.
I got about 30 seconds for you to answer this question, but Mexico is increasing its troop levels at the southern border. They've got, thousands are there now working with U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. Tell me a little bit about how you work, or do you work with the Mexican officials there? How does that work? Or what's the communication like there? I've got about 30 seconds or less.
Yes, sir, and that could be a very long answer, but we do coordinate and cooperate with them. When I was at the Border Patrol, again, we have what's called international liaison units that coordinates directly with the government of Mexico. We've had successes out here in Terrell County with that. But again, we can't rely on Mexico to protect or patrol our borders. It definitely assists, but again, the U.S. government, Congress has to get together to pass laws that make our borders more safe and secure.
Yeah, Sheriff Cleveland, great. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you. And we always talk about being on the front lines. You literally are on the front lines there, right at ground zero. Appreciate your time. Thanks again.
Thank you, David. God bless you.
All right, time for Terrance in Denver. Opening bell, New York Stock Exchange, sponsored by AMAC.
The Association of Mature American Citizens is the conservative voice for Americans 50 and older. AMAC is fighting for the values that you hold dear. Join today. Together, we can write the course of America.
We're preparing for the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. It is set to ring here in short order. In fact, the applause is underway, which means we are quite literally moments away from the bell ringing. Pre-market trading not looking so good. The Dow was up. At one point in time, about 5 minutes ago, the S&P 500 was up as well as the NASDAQ, however, was in the red. And just that quickly, as you can see here, pre-market trading, we're going to put this up here momentarily. Pre-market trading and now actual trading showing a shift in things. The Dow is the only index that is in the positive right now. The rest of our board in the red. The Dow is down, or the S&P 500, and the NASDAQ are both down. Again, literally 5 minutes ago, the S&P 500 was up. Gold, silver, crude oil are also down at the moment. We all want our dogs to stay with us for a really long time, right? Well, while making sure that you're safe and while making sure that your dogs are happy and healthy as well, that's why protecting their longevity is so important, especially as they get older. And that's why you should check out Longevity Formula by PetMade. This formula addresses the four main pillars that your pup needs to stay healthy and active. Number one, joint comfort and mobility. Secondly, healthy skin and coat. Then healthy digestion as well as strong immune health. Take care of your pet friend with the premium supplement and see the results for yourself. If you and your pet are not satisfied, PetMade offers 365-day money-back guarantees, even if the bottle is empty. Plus, right now, there's an exclusive offer only for our viewers. If you happen to order Longevity Formula today, you'll receive a free bottle of Omega-3 Plus formula with your order. Claim your supply of Longevity Formula and free bonus gift today by visiting petmade.com/sunrise. That's petmade.com/sunrise. Still to come here on American Sunrise, Democratic strategist James Carville says that it's all over already for the Trump administration. Wait until you hear his comments. First, though, Lester Holt is leading NBC Nightly News. What more can we expect from NBC and MSNBC? We'll take a look next here on Sunrise.
right, welcome back to American Sunrise. I'm Dr. G. Lots of marveling over Brian's gray suit today. Everybody really liked that, and I just looked it up. You can find it at the Men's Warehouse. We invite you to join the conversation on Getter and Rumble. Time now to take the political pulse of America. The beat today, Kamala Harris cannot seem to get out of her own way or over the 2024 election results, as it were. Here is Harris now saying that there are shadows over our democracy. Take a look.
Some see the flames on our horizons, the rising waters in our cities, the shadows gathering over our democracy, and ask, what do we do now? But we know exactly what to do, because we have done it before, and we will do it again. We use our power. We organize, mobilize, we educate, and we advocate. Because you see, our power has never come from having an easy path. Our strength flows from our faith. Faith in God, faith in each other, and our refusal to surrender to cynicism and destruction.
The heck is that girl talking about? For more, let's bring in the host of America's Voice Live, because he is the Kamala Harris whisperer, Steve Gruber. Go ahead, Steve. You decipher for us.
I speak gobbledygook. Sometimes I can translate. Gobbledygook is my second language. Look, I have no idea what she's talking about, and the good news is neither does she. Smoke on the horizon, rising waters, doom and gloom. No, it's the shining city on the hill. What do you choose, America? Do you want the shining city on a hill in a new golden age of America, or fire in the sky and shadows of death? I mean, come on. I have no idea what they're selling. They have no idea what they're selling. They're on the wrong side of history. They're out there fighting. I mean, I see the governor of Maine, for example, in that spat with Donald Trump, trying to defend. I'll see you in court. Yeah, you will, and you're going to lose. These people that think, well, I don't have to tell Elon Musk what I'm doing at work. Yeah, you kind of do. It's called having a boss. It's called being accountable. The Democrats are so far on the wrong side of all of this, they're having trouble navigating those raging waters and the floods that are coming and the death. I think she forgot pestilence and volcanoes. Those could have been thrown in there, too, just for sport, right? Look, the Democrats have no leader. That's fact. There is no leader of the Democrat Party today. And if that's it, good luck. I saw Bill Maher on a podcast. Maybe you guys saw this here just a couple of days ago, in the last couple of days. Say, if you keep trying to defend men and women's sports, Democrats will lose every election for the rest of your life. I mean, they're so far on the wrong of these 90-10 issues. If you put transgenderism, easy example, if you put that on the ballot in Massachusetts or Maine or California, it would lose 10-1. It would. If you put closing the border on the ballot, it would win, 7-3. I mean, these are not close calls, people. Yeah. So, I can speak gobbledygook with the best of them, but she's awful. It's why she lost. There is no message there. She's just gone. They have no idea what they're talking about.
Steve, to your point about Democrats being on the wrong side of things and it being a new day with President Trump in the White House, is that part of what you think might be leading to some of these shakeups at NBC and MSNBC? We now know that NBC Nightly News anchor Lester Holt going to be leaving the show sometime this summer after hosting that show for 10 years. He's still going to stay with the network, but primarily will focus on Dateline. And then, of course, we know about Joy Reid at MSNBC giving the boot there. Is this really about some of these mainstream media networks now saying, okay, Trump is the man, we know this, we need to get in line?
I'm telling you right now, if you're at MSNBC and you still have a job, you're like, oh my God, the phone rang. Whew. Oh my God. Because I swear that's the attitude at MSNBC, as it should be. Look, if you sit there and lie to your viewers day after day, week after week, year after year, you try to tell them that Russiagate is real and Hunter's laptop is not real. If you're Adam Schiff, I'd be a little nervous as well. But if you're at MSNBC or at Chicken Noodle News, look, you deserve to go away. You've lied to viewers. You've not done your job, whether it's Joy Reid or Alex Wagner. And Lester Holt, he sees the writing on the wall. He's not number one in the ratings. He continues to trail ABC News, which is weird because we know how honest they are as well, which they're not. Look, there's a reason that these big news companies are having massive shakeups. They lied to everybody. They're being held accountable now, and being held accountable in this way. People aren't watching anymore. People aren't reading anymore. People aren't taking them seriously anymore. You know, we talk about how different institutions of this country were damaged by Joe Biden, and they were. But one of the biggest collateral damages that I see is CNN, is MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post. These are companies that have traded their credibility for a narrative, for propaganda that Americans know is simply not true. They know it's simply not true, whether it was in COVID or the border or the economy or the war in Ukraine or the war in Gaza. Most of these companies that you see on your screen right there have sold their soul to the devil. And now the devil's exacting retribution, which means they're collapsing. Look, Joy Reid, nobody took her seriously. She was terrible. No. She had no ratings. And I'm telling you, if I'm Rachel Maddow today and my phone rings from MSNBC, I'm scared to death. Rachel, you make $25 million for a network that has no ratings. Anderson Cooper, you make $20 million a year for a company that has no ratings. Good luck with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jim Acosta gone at CNN, and George Stephanopoulos, he's been pretty much muted over at ABC. I mean, the list goes on. Hey, Steve, let's talk about James Carville for a second, sadly. But he predicts the Trump administration is going to collapse in the next month. Of course, he also predicted Kamala Harris was going to win. He says that he thinks the collapse will come from public opinion because the poll numbers will go down, and he thinks the approval ratings will drop to the upper 30s soon. And he added he thinks the GOP reconciliation bill is going to fail. So I really think it comes down to, why are we even taking James Carville seriously anymore? And I just lost oxygen in my lungs for talking to you about this.
Well, the Ragin' Cajun, look, James Carville, you know, one of the principals in Bill Clinton's orbit, has held sway over Washington politics for several decades. Was pretty good at seeing around a political corner, had a pretty good corner on the market no matter what was going on. But for some reason, he's traded that in. His common sense has gone, look, at least Bill Maher can tell you. And Bill Maher, look, he's a partisan Democrat. He's a progressive. He'll tell you that. But he'll also tell you, if you continue to promote men and women's sports, you're going to lose. If you continue to promote an open border, you're going to lose. The Trump administration isn't going to collapse in 30 days. James Carville has just found himself in a message that has collapsed over the last 4 years in America and was soundly rejected on the 5th of November. James Carville is on the wrong side of history, which surprised me. I honestly did think he was smarter than that. After all, he did marry a conservative. So I thought he was smarter than that. You know, he married up, clearly, but it did not cleanse him of this ignorance. And this ignorance is that somehow Trump's going to fail. Look, Trump is doing what he said he was going to do. And most Americans, and many that did not, those that voted for him support this, and many that did not support this, they say, look, I mean, the support for getting men out of women's sports is like 80% in the polling. Closing the border is like 70%. I mean, these are not close issues. So I would ask Mr. Carville, hey, Jimmy, where exactly is he going to collapse? By Doge? You think people are saying, oh, I know, I want to pay $100,000 for a bag of bullets. I really want to pay for transgender surgeries in Guatemala. I think that in Mozambique, they should be circumcising more men, not just $10 million worth. Let's double the budget to $20 million. I mean, nobody believes that, right? And then you look at USAID, and that's just the tip of a colossal iceberg of waste, fraud, and abuse. People support cutting that. And let me tell you something. If the Doge dividend comes to pass, if they take 20% of the money saved, let's say it's $1 trillion, so you got $200 billion, that would mean about, my math's not perfect on this, but so don't hit me too hard, but $600 or $800 to each person, right? That's a taxpayer. If you get an $800 check, and they said $5,000, but that's if you get to $2 trillion in savings and it's a family of four. So let's just break it down to the average individual, me as an individual, $600, $800. If I get that in the mail as a Doge dividend and they put 80% of it towards reducing cost, I think that is a political winner no matter how you slice it. People are going to go, hey, they cut the spending, they cut the deficit. We've got to get away from $2 trillion deficits. There's no question because the debt's at $36 trillion, $37. We've got to cut these $2 trillion deficits. And if we do that and give you and me and the folks get a check back, the folks are going to be happy, even those that didn't vote for Donald Trump. That is a political winner across the board, no matter how you slice it. I hope it comes to pass. I hope that Donald Trump and Elon Musk can deliver on that. It's a big winner, and it will mean a big difference in the midterm elections. If those checks go out in 26, big winner for the midterms.
Steve, the acting IRS chief Dan O'Donnell reportedly going to step down by the end of the week. The Washington Post reports that O'Donnell is leaving due to disagreements he has with Elon Musk and Doge. Musk's cuts at the IRS reportedly cut the workforce there by about 7,000 workers. Steve, do you see any hostility on the horizon coming out of this, or will this just be part of what's happening, part of the new sheriff in town?
Yeah, there's a lot of hostility. I mean, Joy Reid, she's pretty hostile today. And you say, look, the IRS got trimmed back. Instead of adding 85,000 new people to look at you, me, and rifle through your returns and see if they can find 50 cents, they're going to focus on just doing the job. You know what would be a better service for the IRS? Get new computers. How about that? How about answer your damn phone? How about that? How about when you're at the IRS and I call, which I've done a few times, answer the damn phone? How about that? Let's improve the phone service and customer service experience. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if customer service was somewhere in the top 10 things that people at these agencies that interact with the public were responsible to do? And look, a lot of these places, you go to the DMV, it's an easy example. Most states have a DMV that have computers that should be in history museums. They should not be in public use. They can afford everything else. They can run us $36 trillion in debt, but you can't get a new laptop from Apple? Come on now. We can do better than this. We can answer the phone. We can process your request quicker. We can do customer service. And at the IRS, Mr. O'Donnell, why wait? Why not just leave today? Because we can do better.
Or how about abolish it?
That's my answer. We can do better.
How about abolish it, Steve Gruber, and just come up with a flat tax or something that actually works and is stupid proof?
I've supported that for a long time. Since Steve Forbes first put that out as a candidate for president a number of years back, I think that a flat tax, a transaction tax, is the best way to go. If you eliminated income tax in America, you want to see the economy just take off like a rocket ship, like a Musk rocket ship. That's how you do it. Look at the states that have no taxes. Tennessee, Florida, New Hampshire just joined on the 1st of January. Can't wait to see their numbers for 2025 and how they do, because people from Maine and Vermont are going to pile in going, hey, no taxes right here. Look at that.
Yep.
They're going to have a very positive experience in the state of New Hampshire, I can assure you.
Trump's
Getting
talking
rid of
about
taxes spurs the economy.
Yeah, Trump's talking about it. All right, Steve Gruber, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you being with us, as always.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, guys.
Coming up, after Trump-proofing California, what is Gavin Newsom asking Washington for now? Well, we have the answer next on American Sunrise.
Let's spill some tea.
Let's Spill Some Tea is sponsored by Artillery Tea Company. ArtilleryTeaCo.com is the website. Use the promo code RAV for 10% off. Artillery Tea is all natural. It's whole leaf. The tea bags are chemical free, and each can be used twice. Artillery Tea Company is family and veteran owned and operated, and a portion of your purchase goes to help veteran and first responder charities. The website, once again, ArtilleryTeaCo.com. Use the promo code RAV, that's R-A-V, and score yourself 10% off. All right, let's get right into what's in the cup today. And after signing $50 million to Trump-proof California, California Governor Gavin Newsom is now asking for $40 billion in fire relief with no strings attached. That's the key. Newsom sent a memo to Congress saying the money that he receives will be used wisely, and it's going to ensure that everyone who lost property in the fires will be served. The Trump administration had called for certain conditions like changes in water and forest management. However, Newsom is again pleading for no strings attached here, even after Trump-proofing California. Let's bring in Dr. Gina and David to talk a bit more about this. Dr. Gina, the two words, boy, bye, come to mind here.
Yeah, you know, here's the thing. This administration in California, the Newsom administration, is responsible for the fact that those fires happened. So they're going to do anything they can to try to deflect, divert, distract, and blame others, because that's what children do, by the way. It's always the children's mentality that you point at the other kid. He did it. They did it. It's your fault. It's their fault. Never going to take responsibility. Never going to do what actually needs to happen to prevent future tragedies because of the water diversion that they have used as an excuse for their whole climate change agenda, Terrance. That's what it's really all about, David.
Yeah, and has Gavin Newsom met Donald Trump? Has he read The Art of the Deal?
Right.
No strings attached? No. That's not how The Art of the Deal works. There's always strings attached. Enter President Zelensky. I mean, come on. I mean, this is ridiculous. There's not only going to be strings attached, but it's going to end up being a victory, not for Gavin Newsom, but for the people of California, because I think ultimately Donald Trump's going to do what's in their best interest, but making sure, wait for it, America first. So somehow, some way, there will be some sort of deal where the folks in California are taken care of. Trump's always going to take care of them, but Gavin Newsom's not going to get away with this. And then, to add insult to injury, he wants the legislature out there, or the assembly, excuse me, to is it the assembly out there? I think it's the assembly, to pass all of this, hundreds of millions of dollars to fight Trump in court? Give me a break. Not going to happen.
Can you imagine being a taxpayer in California, and you've already been through all of this trauma, and you've already been built and completely depleted, and then now they want to charge you to take Trump to court for trying to help?
I mean, come on.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense.
These people.
And let's just take politics out of it. California, Gavin Newsom specifically, and other officials around that state have shown that they're not good stewards of the taxpayers' money. They failed the taxpayer there in California on so many occasions. So why would I, as Congress, send money to you and say, oh, do with it as you choose. I trust you. Child, please. No. There's no way. There's no way.
Yeah. Child, please.
Child,
Those are the
please.
final words. Child, please. Child, please.
Yeah. And we'll just leave it there with child,
Yes,
please.
we
In fact,
will.
we should just go to break right there. Child, please, go to break. Still to come here on American Sunrise, we have this touching reunion of a woman and a man who she saved when he was just a toddler. You'll have to stick around for Sunny Side Up to see it all unfold.
might or might not have just given Colby a little bite of my egg sandwich here next to me on the couch, and he chews really loudly, almost as loudly as you type, David Brody. Welcome back to American Sunrise. Yeah. Welcome back to American Sunrise. I am Dr. Gina. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now it is time for our Sunny Side Up. And in the pan today, a woman was reunited with a man she saved from drowning when he was just a toddler. Wow. Barbara Ribeiro was attending a neighborhood party, and she thought it was going to be a normal, joyous occasion. But then a small child wandered off, and everyone had to find this 21-month-old child, Ben Colwell. He wandered away and fell into a pool where Ribeiro jumped in and saved him. Listen.
When I really think of it, I just think hand of God. He made sure that I made it for some reason.
I'm sorry. Don't you apologize to me. You saved a life.
Thank you so much for going and looking for me.
I'm glad it turned out the way it did.
Me too.
That is super sweet. I want to know both of them. They both seem like really, really nice people too, don't they, T?
No, absolutely. And that's the sort of thing that unites someone for life. Obviously, it preserved a life, but that's a bond that's going to be unbreakable. And I think we just saw it in that video. It's an unbreakable bond. And the gentleman saying, you know, don't be sorry, you saved my life. Like, and the other thing, and David, and I'll leave it alone because I probably can go on for 2 more minutes. But the other thing is, I think in situations like this, and even though he was a toddler at the time, but you've got a second lease on life, and so you've got to do something with it. You've got to pay it forward and make sure that your life impacts a community, or at least another life. And I'm hopeful that he's doing that, Dr. Gina and David.
Yeah, and I love the way, you know, just towards the end of your life, right? I mean, just this idea that's kind of like a full closure situation for both of them, And I'm just curious of the backstory on that. I'll have to do some more research after the show about how it actually came to be. You know, like this is going on obviously for decades, it had not been happening for decades, and then finally at the end, I wonder what was the impetus? It was just curiosity after all these years. I'm curious because it's a great story.
It is a great story. You know, he may have come across, like my dad died this past year, and I was looking through old newspaper articles, had no idea. So many amazing things had happened in my own family, and I find all these newspaper articles that my dad, for whatever reason, just never told me. And so maybe he came across it, you know, in some old family thing and said, I want to find this lady, and did. But I tell you what, I could smell her grandma perfume when I saw her chair with the little arm covers on the chair. Didn't we all have a grandma like that?
Oh, yeah. Did you guys' grandma have the plastic on all the furniture? Like back in the 70s, plastic on all... Yeah, and in the summertime, you sat on it, and it was hard to...
I'll tell you, as my friend Charlene pointed out in the text, I had a grandma. She didn't do all that, but I still loved that whole grandma imagery. It's just so beautiful. My grandma was very glamorous. She didn't... No plastic on the chairs. Great show today. Thank you all for joining us. We have so much more for you each and every morning, and it all starts at 8 a.m. We will see you then, of course. And don't forget Jake Novak's early show starts at 7 a.m. We're going to get this all done. We're going to straighten up. We are going to be perfect anchors by about 10 a.m. Eastern time today. War Room is up next.
Perfect
Go boldly now. Live the truth.
Perfect anchor. Perfect anchor.
Need to be doing in your opinion that they're not doing right now?
We need a strategy up and down, right? So running for office is a longer term thing. We got thousands of people looking into that. But right now, the top leaders of the Democratic Party, I don't expect the revolution to come from them, but the top leaders of the Democratic Party need to stop being milquetoast. I'll be very specific. Last night, Rachel Maddow's show, Leader Jeffries is on the show. Tell me if I'm wrong. You can at me on any social media platform if I'm wrong. I don't think any American watching that interview with Leader Jeffries would have come away feeling defended deep in their heart in the middle of an autocratic takeover by that high-ranking Democrat. It was full of legal terms as it relates to in terms of, and it was full of every time she gave him a chance to empathize with people who say he's not doing enough, they're not doing enough. Every time she gave him that opportunity, as a gifted interviewer that she is, instead of saying, yeah, I can get why people feel that way about what we're doing. Nope, we're doing this. Nope, we don't need any more steel in our spine. defensiveness and self-protection do not make an opposition. It is going to take a true fiery opposition that understands how deeply undefended Americans feel right now by this psychological onslaught by the abuser in chief and by his shadow president. And it's going to take, if you are not one of the people with the mettle to stand up to an autocratic coup, get out of the way. There are so many other jobs. Become a lobbyist like you're probably planning to do anyway in a few years. Accelerate that plan. Get out of the way for people who know how to stand up and are adequate to this moment.
Oh, I think so many things. This is such a tragic day. Igor, as an American, I just want to apologize for my president, that he called your president a dictator, that he has voted now with the countries like North Korea, Belarus, Russia. These are now our new friends at the United Nations. This is shameful. But Igor, I also want you to know that most Americans do not support the president on this. Polls show, the Quinnipiac poll last week, 81% of the Americans, people do not support president's embrace of Putin. And he is, Stephanie, to your question, yes, Putin is playing Trump. I've seen this before. He thinks that all people in the world can be bought. He thinks that no people have any morals. And now he's throwing out an aluminum deal to lure him in. And tragically, for reasons that are very difficult for me to explain, President Trump is more concerned with starting a relationship with Putin than actually negotiating a peace deal. Because otherwise, how do you explain diplomacy 101, order the deal 101? I have the book right here. In any negotiations, you just don't hand over everything that the other side wants and then hope down the road that they might give you something in return. So the only explanation is he's really not serious about negotiating a peace deal. He just wants to have his relationship with Vladimir Putin.
You first, Ruth, give me an assessment from your expert point of view of the resistance that we're seeing in the country to all of the Doge, Elon Musk, Trump chaos.
Yeah, so as we know, we don't have a big generalized nonviolent mass protest, but we have righteous indignation breaking out spontaneously all over the nation. And Joy, I really believe that there's a reckoning that's going to come, because what's happening now at the hands of literally the world's richest man, who has taken control of our government and is using it to enrich himself and investigating. He's, destroying agencies that have been investigating his companies. This brings forth it brings to a peak all of the unfairness of neoliberalism, all of the kind of the rich get richer, and that's one part of authoritarianism. It's more, fewer rights for the many and way more liberties for the few. And so we're seeing a kind of indignation and anger that's erupting at local town halls, in front of GOP members of Congress and in their town halls. And so this is a very good sign of something larger that I believe will come.
This is the primal scream of a dying regime. Pray for our enemies, because we're going medieval on these people. You're just not got a free shot on all these networks lying about the people. The people have had a belly full of it. I know you don't like hearing that. I know you try to do everything in the world to stop that, but you're not going to stop it. It's going to happen.
And where do people like that go to share the big lie? MAGA media. I wish in my soul, that any of these people had a conscience.
Ask yourself, what is my task and what is my purpose? If that answer is to save my country, this country will be saved.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Tuesday, 25 February, year of our Lord, 2025. The meltdown continues, but obviously it's off the mark, as it always is, and a major collapse in mainstream media as you're seeing anchors, the numbers implode at CBS, The anchors get blown out at MSNBC. The second tier, the ones that they're building up, they're coming out of the bullpen, getting blown out. All of it. But back to in reality of what's happening, President Trump is, and this week, it is this geostrategic realignment, which is the most significant realignment since the Second World War. Even President Reagan, who destroyed the evil empire and the Bolsheviks, remember Bush 43 was in office. So all the work President Trump had done all those years, actually Nixon and Nixon and Reagan, that came to fruition in Tiananmen Square in June of 89, and then the fall of the Berlin Wall in November of 89. Remember, always remember, because they don't teach you this, is that those two are, 6 months apart, 5 months apart. That we did not take advantage of that, the collapse of those two regimes. In fact, we did the exact opposite in China with the CCP. Bush 41 basically sent Scowcroft over and propped up the CCP and made a deal with them on WTO, on most favored nations, and essentially laid out the plan that they would become the slave labor camp for the modern industrial world, which has done nothing but destroy workers throughout the world since then, and the Chinese people. At the same time, instead of reaching out to the Russian people and working with them, you had a bunch of vultures fly in immediately to Russia and just try to steal the assets for 10 cents on the dollar. That led to a reaction. That was the equivalent, the moral equivalent of the 2008 financial collapse. And what you had was the people responded to that. Next thing you know, you get the KGB coming in as a quote-unquote nationalist group. And, of course, they run the deal like they run the deal. And we are where we are now. President Trump is trying to... So, because President Reagan at that time had the beginnings of, Alzheimer's, dementia. He was, quite frankly, a little bit out of it after his term, all the great work he did in taking down the evil empire and trying to fight off the Bush apparatchiks, Jim Baker and that crowd, the globalists that got in there in the second term. He still fought them off, took down the evil empire, but no major realignment. This is what President Trump's doing, a massive geostrategic realignment. One in the defense of his own nation here, but also in what Secretary of State Marco Rubio laid out in his opening statement to the Senate in his confirmation, that the post-war international rules-based order has been gamed to gut America and to basically gut American citizens. This is what President Trump is trying to, reformat right now on the Eurasian landmass. That's why these discussions he's having with Putin and the Russians are tantamount to everything. Everything else takes secondary, including the Ukraine. Now, the Ukraine is a subset of that. I think the key for Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Rubio and Scott Bessent, Secretary of Treasury, and, of course, Steve Witkoff, is to make sure that we don't get so entangled and wrapped around the axle about what they're going to try to wrap around. You saw yesterday perfectly with Macron. Macron we played in the last night show. He's trying to slide in there security guarantees, this, that, the other thing, ba-bing, ba-bang, ba-bung. They still want the United States. They still want to be a protectorate. What President Trump's trying to do is an overall rapprochement with the Russians. And remember, the Russian people who bled on the battlefields of World War II are our natural allies. They just are. Not saying the governments, the Romanovs were not. They're as bad as you get. And all these people that romanticize these monarchies ought to read the Russian history and see how they treated working class people and see how they treated the peasants. They're awful, awful people. All these people talk about the divine right of kings and all this. I'm a Irish Republican, small I, small r, right? I cannot stand monarchies. I detest them. I think they've done nothing but bring terrible blights onto the world. And the most worthless people, they get in that gene pool. Look at the gene pool that was there before World War I. From Germany to, they're all cousins. And all idiots like the group running England now. Not the best. A closed gene pool leads to, not bringing your best and no competition. President Trump is shattering that. This geostrategic and geoeconomic, at the same time, it's an entirely new business model for the United States. This is 32 days, 33 days, folks, because it's been thought of and thought through for years and years and years. And President Trump has spent a lot of time thinking about this. So from the Panama Canal to Greenland, the forward thrusting of the defense of America into a naval strategy, right? You take the Arctic, add that on top of it. Look at on the West Coast, that desert that is the Pacific Ocean. Now, if you look at the globe, you literally have water on one side. You can turn the globe and just see it's nothing but water. You see no land. That's this vast, what I call the desert of the Pacific Ocean. Then the other, you got the world island, which is the Eurasian landmass, and you have this island chain kind of off of that. That island chain off of it would be the Western Hemisphere. James Monroe and those guys knew what they were doing when they decided that, hey, we should not let Europe get into the Western Hemisphere. We'll hermetically seal it. We'll oversee the deal, and we'll let people breathe free over time. That's what President Trump's doing. From Canada and the Arctic down to the Panama Canal, we obviously have to free our colleague and our comrade, Bolsonaro, who looks like he's going to go to 40 years of prison if we don't somehow intervene with the corrupt judges down there. It was leaked yesterday that they were trying to roll up, I think, Tucker Carlson and myself and trying to charge us also as outsiders for supporting a coup d'etat because what we said on air. Hey, my response to you, Brazil, bring it. Bring it. Right, bring it. You guys are corrupt as they come and Marxist as they come, and you get the Chinese Communist Party all over you. At the same time, remember, we always said the 3 lines of work immediately for Trump is stop the kinetic part of the Third World War, which he's doing. Then the mass deportations, which, let's be blunt, we're a little hung up. Trying to get the criminals down at the sanctuary cities, but this collapse of ICE and the collapse of what Biden did internally, $175 billion, which is kind of in this reconciliations bill. We have not even begun or commenced even, I think, the process of the mass deportations. But the third one that's the most important, the existential crisis, is the spending and to sort this thing out. Now, it's announced tonight the House is going to vote on this budget reconciliation. I don't think he's got the votes. I think it's 15 or 20 short. And some of the smartest voices there, MTG and Warren Davidson, who don't agree on a lot, are both putting out tweets saying, hello, don't we have a CR coming on the 14th? We got to figure this out. And MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, saying, hey, beware the Ides of March. She's throwing down right now and says, hey, I don't see a CR for the end of the year. Warren Davidson is saying, and Warren Davidson, kind of a fiscal conservative, he's sitting there going, look, I don't want to hear any budget reconciliation until somebody kindly tells me what we're going to do on the CR to finance the rest of the year. Full stop. The gospel according to the war room. So we're in it right now. President Trump has changed the direction. You see Doge, you see what's happening over at NSA with this chat room. What he's up against, the administrative and deep state pushing back on every front, going to court, embeds. So this is exactly what we wanted. It's a full-on war against the administrative and deep state and the ossified ruling class in this country. We're going to go to the White House next. Brian Glenn, we're going to talk about that press conference yesterday.
Brian, would you like to ask a question? Go ahead.
Welcome, President Trump. I just want to touch upon real quickly the Harvard poll that came out that had, thank you very much, the Harvard poll that came out had you up 9+ points, and all of your agenda that you ran on, you're accomplishing that. You got the support of the American people, including stopping the war in Ukraine. If you can comment on the latest Harvard poll, I'd appreciate that.
Well, I was honored by it. It was a big poll, and it's usually a poll that leans on the other side of things, the other side of the world, so to speak. But the Harvard poll is a respected poll, and it has us not only leading, but leading by a lot, and leading on every single issue that we've talked about. And as I said, we've become the party of common sense. And I think that's a very important element now, common sense, because what's happening in the world and even in this country, some of the things that took place, many of them are now canceled, and the rest are being canceled as we speak.
Amazing. The poll we talked about with Brian Glender in the day, Brian got a question. As folks at home should understand, or let me explain something. There are major journalists that work their entire life to get a question, but much less the first question and called by name by the president. I think that shows the respect that President Trump has for the work that Brian Glenn and Real America's Voice, we've made a major commitment to the White House and covering the White House nonstop. Amanda Head, Natalie Winters, Brian Glenn, plus an entire team up there. And just so people know, because I'm going to talk about the House and what's going up there in a minute. I mean, Brian was a key asset up at the House, but he's doing such a great job in the White House that we're going to restaff and get back to our House coverage. Brian, and it was also a perfect question because it set up the entire conference. You framed it that, hey, you're doing all these different things. You're running to the sound of the guns and everything. The Harvard-Harris poll, which is a very respected poll, was quite frankly stunning. Not just that President Trump, his approval ratings up by 9, 52%, I think, approved, 44% disapproved, or 41%, or 43%. So he's up 9 points, plus 9, but then in every category. And in the categories themselves, when you look at these numbers, when numbers are 75 and 80%, that means, and that's why we played the cold open, the Democrats. On MSNBC and CNN, this is 24/7. You don't have to watch it, so we do. We distill it for you. But what you saw in the cold open today is 24/7. My point. When President Trump is pulling 70, 75, 80, that means all the Republican Party, but more importantly, basically 80% of the independents or 90% of the independents are with him. People that are not really affiliated with a party or don't consider themselves partisan. This is just a rump, hardcore Democrat, which is never, ever going to approve President Trump. Brian Glenn, it was a perfect question. His response was also terrific, and you stuck the dagger in to Macron to say, even on ending the Ukraine war. Brian Glenn from the White House, your thoughts, sir?
Yeah. Well, Steve, first of all, thank you for sending that Harvard poll to me and your staff as well, because I was not aware of that until you sent it to me. And then as I was reading it over, I thought this is exactly what I'm going to ask, because I knew that no one else in that room, Steve, would have asked the president that question to get his thoughts. But more importantly, Steve, I wanted the foreign press and all of those watching us around the world to know that President Trump has so much support from the American people, not just on the war in Ukraine, of ending it and stopping the conveyor belt of American tax dollars, but also on immigration, also all the other key issues that Harvard poll looked at, it reviewed, and you've laid it out perfectly. It's just not all Republicans support this. It's people that have been maybe agnostic in politics to begin with. People that have been independent, maybe moderate Democrats, now can agree. And he often says, Steve, we are the party of common sense. So it is my honor to be here. I do not take it lightly. It is a privilege to report from the White House. It is not a given right. No one has the right to walk in here in that briefing room or even in the Oval Office or the East Room. So I take it very seriously. But I do appreciate the president calling me out for these questions. And I just trying to reflect what what America feels. And I want to ask the questions that the War Room Posse has. And that is, as the average person sitting at home, they're not getting that representation in the briefing room. They haven't gotten it in a long time, but they have it now. And I'm just honored to be here, Steve.
It is a revolution of common sense. I also think it's a revolution of common decency. I think when you look at President Trump's, the policies he's talking about and how he's trying to implement them, it's kind of the merger of both of those. And they're on offense. Unlike, I can say this from the first term, when we won at we closed hard, won at the end, did not have things like Project 2025 or America First Party Institute, Brooks Rowland's team, or Stephen Miller didn't have years working on these policies. That's the difference. The difference is you can back up the punch and you have muzzle velocity on these, that even people that are low information voters like what they see. Now, as you know, the War Room Posse and Real America's Voice, we drill down and we give you a different take on the news of the day, unlike anything, including Fox News, to get into the details. The reality is that the White House is punching hard, and you know how hard they're punching, Brian, probably better than anybody. But we're now